Preview. Welcome to the big show, Grizzle Psychedelics Con. You've been waiting for it. We're doing it back to back to Grizzle Cannabis Con tomorrow. This is the biggest, unparalleled combination of leaders from both respective disruptive industries. We're doing it for you. Grizzle.
Who else but Grizzle is doing conferences open source like this, putting you in front of all the leaders in all the growth industries? That's just how we do it. This is just the beginning.
Super exciting. We had a stacked lineup today. These are the leaders of the industry breaking it down for you. We ain't quitting, man. We're not even taking, we're basically going end to end to end. So excited. Scott, you want to hit the lineup?
Yeah, all right. So here's who you're going to hear from today. We got a stacked lineup. So we're kicking it off with Atai. Then we got Field Trip, HAVN, PharmaTher, Mindset, Psyched Wellness, Goodness Growth, and we're ending it all off with Compass Pathways. Man, what a lineup.
Yeah. All right, let's kick it off. Atai Life Sciences. Well, Christian, I think the way to start it off is just, Atai has a unique vantage point in the psychedelics mental health industry. Could you please just give us a backdrop on the current global health mental health crisis, and also weave in, COVID-19, because obviously that's been a challenge as well. But we'd love to get your take on the state of mental health globally. Okay.
The state of mental health is very bad. Unfortunately, meaning the headline number is always, I think we all quoting that, is 1 billion people at the moment are diagnosed with one or more mental health issues, which is already making mental health issues both the number one disease in terms of patients globally, and the number one disease also in terms of costs for the healthcare systems and society. Additionally, that 1 billion number, again, which is already as it is super crazily high, is actually way too low for several reasons. The one is that, which is sad, it's still a very stigmatized group of diseases. So people who need help not always getting it. So practically the dark number, or how you would say in English, is most likely way higher than these 1 billion. Yeah. The good thing is, by the way, is that more in society is destigmatizing it. So more and more famous people are coming forward, and saying they have a mental health issue, and that is helping destigmatize it and people seeking help. But that will lead, by destigmatization, to more and more people coming forward, the number going up. That's one thing. Yeah. Second, as you mentioned, there are many sort of issues or many developments in our society, in our world, which unfortunately are very bad for our brain. COVID is a very current one, and we can't, I think, even grasp the effect of COVID on mental health, but it's going to be devastating, and the number is going to be out maybe in a year from now. My gut feeling is it's going to be hundreds of millions of people more additionally suffering from mental health. I'll give you an example. One of our investors in Atai and early shareholders is a very famous singer, and he did he's not out yet in terms of talking about his involvement, so I can't say what it is. He's a very famous guy, and preparing an interview with him. But he did a questionnaire. Obviously, that's not super scientific, whatever. But among his fans and his fan club, which is millions of fans. By the way, he's from Canada, so people could maybe think of him.
You're giving us little breadcrumbs here.
Of his fans. Breadcrumbs. At 80, but the sad number is 80% of his fans said they feel depressed or lonely or have anxiety. 80% of young people. Yeah, and it's definitely so COVID's going to make it worse, but also other developments in our society. I would say, simplified said, and I'm very self-critical because I'm investing in tech as well, and biotech. The world we're building is actually, as amazing as it might be in other things, is not good for our mental health. So the more we progress with,
Christian, I think about that a lot.
Innovation. Yeah. So long story short, 1 billion now destigmatization will rise the numbers. Then the world we have will create more and more people. And then last point, which is sort of one of my most important points. It is a little bit out, but like time-wise out, but like I even believe there are illnesses, or say, let's rather call it issues, we all have, which are not even defined as a disease. Like take loneliness. Today, loneliness is not a treatable disease, but it is actually one. Actually, when people are lonely, there are great studies, they die earlier. By the way, we're becoming a lonely society through all ages, like, but especially old people are lonely, they are pushed away in old people's home whatsoever. And that is literally taking lifetime away from them, because we are pack animals, we're social animals, we want to have friends, we need a social environment. So for example, take loneliness. I think loneliness can easily be cured with psychedelics. First step is obviously to sort of define loneliness as a disease, but then I'm very sure if we would run clinical trials against loneliness with psychedelics, would be a tremendous positive outcome. So if I take that all together, what I just said, where we are now, then the growth in because of destigmatization, the growth of because the world is bad for mental health, and then ultimately all the issues out there, which are, from my point of view, treatable, but not at the moment sort of accepted or acknowledged as a disease, that altogether, I would say the total addressable market for mental health is literally the entire world population. In one way or the other, we would all profit from a new sort of paradigm or a new way to look at mental health. Yeah. Maybe, by the way, one day, even as preventative. Why do we actually have to wait, knowing how challenging our world is for mental health? Why do we have to wait actually till people get depressive to put them out again? Maybe somewhere mental health, from my point of view, and obviously, by the way, it's not just psychedelics, but psychedelics, I think, are the number one group of medical compounds we have to combat the mental health crisis. Ultimately, it's a total addressable market of 100% of the world population.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal way to, like, it's just a total paradigm shift, as you just said, right? Thinking that it's not a on-off switch. It's we're all living on a spectrum of we can all reach a better mental health outcome. And I think COVID-19 has clearly shown us that this is not, we've all felt isolated in this, your anxiety, all these issues just stack on top of each other. Now, I want to ask you just a question. What's wrong with the traditional treatments? Why has there been no evolution? And maybe you can tie in the opportunity and hope for psychedelics or other alternative mental health treatments.
So wouldn't just say wrong is maybe the wrong word. Like, it's just like very, very insufficient. Yeah. So I'm not condemning, because what is out there, it's mainly SSRIs, from a therapeutics point of view, and there may be some other therapies like talk therapy, and I'm not saying SSRIs, for example, are completely garbage, but they help way less people than we think, and they create a lot of other problems. But for some people, SSRIs might be the right thing. How I see our brain is very complex, and there are many, many root causes which lead to mental health issues. And so we need a broad tool set. This is why Atai is so broad. Like, at the moment, we have 11 clinical programs, and we want more. We have actually a very, very active business development pipeline. And what I deeply believe how the future of mental health will look like, the main person is the therapist. It's like your general physician. And he needs, or he hopefully he or she does understand the patient best, knows what the problems are, and then can say, look, for you, psychedelics are the best. And then, by the way, if we talk about psychedelics, it's very generalized. The therapist might say, for you, it's MDMA, for you, it's magic mushrooms or psilocybin, for you, it's DMT, like, because in nuance,
Christian, can I ask you a question?
They solve different problems.
Can I ask you a question on that specifically? If that's the case, like, the therapist is basically the conduit, do we have enough therapists, like, for that ultimately? No. Okay.
Yeah, but it's a good start. I mean, there are the good thing is, like, at the moment, therapists are, and I don't want to, because it's not their fault, they're trying to help, but they kind of wasting time because they have insufficient tools, but they can't let the patient down. So they may take a patient who's treatment resistant, depressive, whatever. You might need to have hundreds of hours of talk therapy to keep the patient stable. Yeah, it's worth it because maybe the patient will kill themselves otherwise. Yeah, but in the future, so but like at the moment, so we have two little therapists, but on the other side, they spend time a lot with patients because they have no tools just to keep them stable. My hope is that first step, we're gonna give therapists in the future, hopefully very soon, more tools at hand. Yeah, and I believe again, psychedelics are the most important ones. Yeah, to serve their patients better. Yeah, and maybe quicker. Yeah, in average. So maybe you just need 20 hours then per patient and not 100 hours in average. So which actually will free up a bit of time because of being more efficient. And then what I also hope, that's just my own opinion, is that by giving the therapists better tool sets, it makes the job of a therapist more fulfilling. Because what do you want as a doctor, as a therapist? You want to help your patient. And at the moment, I spoke to so many therapists who are like, actually, give you one example, it was very, very moving. There was this one therapist from Germany who was like, look, I know in that case psilocybin helps because I was there when it was this older guy, when it was still a medication. So the government, for wrong reasons, took away something which is helping my patients. So he told me, he was like, if I have a patient where I see nothing else helps, I'm growing mushrooms myself. Wow. Because I sworn an oath as a doctor to help my patients with the best way possible. But at the moment, I can lose my license and I can go to jail. So I really, really do it as an ultima ratio. Yeah. And he said, look, I'm rooting for you because you're going to give me back the tools where we all know that they work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and by making the job of a therapist more fulfilling, I hope actually more people will go for that job. Yeah. And also obviously because they see the economic potential. So I believe that with the success of psychedelics in parallel, maybe with 1 or 2 years delays, 3 years, but the market's going to solve it. Yeah, we're going to see a rise in therapists. And the last point, sorry that I always talk so long, but it is a very complex topic.
No, for sure.
I mean, we could talk, forever.
Sort of in the core, yeah. So in the core, you need the human touch. It's my belief. Yeah, but you can make a therapist more efficient with digital therapeutics on their side. Yeah. So we had Atai, by the way, which is, and I know it's also an investment conference, not just like.
Yeah, no.
I don't want to talk about
no, this is it.
Just like this. So what I can tell you is like I completely believe that we have this amazing digital therapeutics sort of business, and we're gonna talk more and reveal more, yeah, over the next months and the next year. But we don't get any credit so far. Yeah, it's practically a free option people are buying. Yeah, because at the moment everybody's looking at our really amazing drug pipeline. But I do believe they go very, very much hand in hand. So both we create IP, which is, by the way, a topic we should touch, which is very, very important, intellectual property and patents, by combining our therapies with digital therapeutics. And we make the life of patients and of therapists much more easier and the probability of success much higher.
Christian, so just on the portfolio IP that Atai has assembled, could you just talk about what you're addressing, the different compounds? Just give us an overview of what an investor gets when they get Atai.
Yep. So first of all, because I said earlier already, the mind is complex, and I do think we need a broad toolbox for investors. So Atai, the headline is we're a mental health company. Yeah, we have our roots and we have a strong focus on psychedelics, which is obviously my personal sort of heart topic. But we actually have grown and added also non-psychedelic compounds to our platform. So the 11 ones, 6 are psychedelics, 5 are non-psychedelic. So what is, by the way, the most important thing for investors to know, which again, I do think we don't get enough credit, is all of our compounds, the psychedelic ones and the non-psychedelic ones, have what I would say called prior evidence in humans. So simplified said, we know these drugs work, yeah, all of them. We know they safe. We know that because either they have been used somewhere in the history, actually already medically, like psilocybin was used in Europe from Sandoz, or our GABA drug was used in France, or is actually used in France, or at least they are used shamanistically, like in South America, or whatever. But either because of medical and or historic reasons, we do have that, let's call it anecdotal evidence. Yeah. What we have to do at Atai, or what we are doing, we're taking these compounds and sort of redoing the studies, and doing it once and for all in a very sort of rigorous scientific FDA setting. And yes, I have to say, we can always make a mistake in that execution, but the great thing is, different than any other biotech company I would know, we don't have that negative surprise risk. We're not going to wake up and realize, oh, DMT doesn't really work. Or DMT. Yes. So we know enough. Again, it's something else or it's some additional thing to transform it into this FDA framework. But it's definitely a highly, highly de-risk approach compared to any other biotech company, with that massive upside we just discussed, because the market, because we're targeting the #1 market in the world. So the second thing is like what we did, and we have sort of the benefit of being the first one. So I'm extremely proud, a little bit, but and I believe in faith and spirituality, but that's for another discussion. We have been the very, very first one. By the way, if I say we, I include actually Compass, which you're going to have at the end of the day. Because sort of Compass was first, and we own still. So Compass was is an Atai subsidiary. We own around about 20%. Atai owns 20% of Compass. Technically, actually, Compass was first. So I seeded Compass, and the management is awesome. So I don't know who's on it, but they're all awesome. And when we then realized that, okay, this is working, which was end of 2017, I decided to start Atai to really do the whole sort of sector and put my Compass stake into it. So why I'm telling you that is because we were the first one in this millennia. We have all the evidence from the last century, but in this millennia, I can proudly say Compass, the team of Compass and me together, were the first one to retry it in the medical world. And for 2 years then, I would say, so from 2018 till mid-2019, Atai, including Compass, was literally, we were the only ones. There were no other companies. So we had the opportunity to look at all the IP, and you need intellectual property. I know it's a hot topic for some socialists, but you need it if you want to build a biotech business.
For sure.
You need patents, you need intellectual property. So and we were the only ones. So we were able to practically either acquire all the intellectual property which was still there or attached to somebody, or we were able to recreate it, newly created, whatever. So that gave, and by the way, which was also lucky, we had a lot of capital money from the beginning, because I'm a serial entrepreneur. So I put in 40 million myself, which not a lot of other founders could put into Atai. And then we had big investors like Peter Thiel, Louis Bacon, Mike Novogratz be with us from the beginning. So we were very well capitalized. So we had the money. I would say we're not dumb. I have great colleagues who are able to execute, and we had the vision. So we practically almost cornered the whole market. So I would proudly say, and I know you have some more companies on today, but like we do own almost everything which makes commercial sense. Might it be that we forgot some niche sort of thing? Might be. But like the vast majority, I think, which makes commercial sense. So we cannot dispute, and this is, I think, the loophole I give some other companies, is that somebody could say, well, I have a different view on commercial sense. What do I mean with commercial sense? We looked at all the compounds out there, and there was always two questions we had to answer. The one is like, can we create intellectual property and IP around it? And patents. And second, do we see a place for that respective compound in the medical world? And just if both answers were yes, then we were doing it. So yes, maybe we missed something, maybe we have a different opinion, but trust me, I think I'm not dumb. Yeah,
well, Christian, I sincerely, this has been a phenomenal, like you're a wealth of knowledge, information on this incredible sector. And
I can say personally, I'm happy we started the conversation, and we're going to be watching you guys closely. So we look forward to bringing you on the Grizzle Network more in the future and hearing more about what Atai is doing. We love that.
It's my
it comes across for sure.
Christian, thank you.
So by the way, if you look behind me, one last sentence, if you look behind me, that's a cool artist, Chemical X. It's all MDMA pills.
That's amazing.
And I hope.
When can I come to the party?
Next time, I can't move. Exactly. It's double sealed. But next time we can do, because I have these pretty cool, I think, psychedelic art collection, but then we do next time.
Beautiful.
We're going to hold you to it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Christian.
Christian from
anytime.
Atai Life Sciences. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And so we're going to take a short break, everyone, and then we're going to be right back with Field Trip. Don't go anywhere.
All right, Grizzle Psychedelics Con. We're with you all day, guys. If you are on YouTube, hit that thumbs up. And on Twitter, please, fam, hit the retweet. We're bringing you one of the best psychedelics conferences, actually the biggest of the year. We had more listeners to Psychedelics Con than any other psychedelics conference. It's the way it goes. We are fortunate to have Field Trip join us next. All right, so we have thank you, Ronan, Ronan Levy, chairman from Field Trip. Thank you very much for joining us, Ronan. Great to see you again.
You too, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ronan. Just for the those new to the name, new to the company, could you just provide everyone an overview of what Field Trip does?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're an integrated psychedelics company. We're a NASDAQ-listed integrated psychedelics company. And what that means is that we're focused both on developing the next generation of psychedelic medicines, as well as building the clinical infrastructure to deliver psychedelic medicine. Because as you look into psychedelic medicine, the thing that becomes self-evident really quickly is this is experiential medicine. It's not just about the drug. It's about the drug paired with the therapy. It's the drug paired with the set and setting. All of these things have significant impact on the therapeutic outcome. And so if you're focused on one without the other, in our opinion, you're leaving an essential component outside of your control. And so we're doing that together. We got Field Trip Discovery with FT104, which we'll talk about, and now our FT200 series, as well as Field Trip Health, building out clinical infrastructures. We got locations across North America, as well as one in the Netherlands presently.
Fantastic.
Great.
Now, Field Trip Discovery. So that's the drug side of the business. Could you talk about your lead development candidate, FT104? What are the characteristics of this drug and its advantages, particularly to psilocybin?
Sure. So on a very high level, the classic psychedelics that we see with psilocybin and MDMA, we're seeing fantastic, amazing results with them. Don't get me wrong. There's not a commentary on like the downsides of psilocybin and MDMA. They're great medicines. Doesn't mean we can't do better. Two big challenges, risks associated with classic psychedelics. One is the long time frame, the duration of experience. With psilocybin, you're looking at a full day in a clinical setting. Ideally, within Field Trip, don't get me wrong, but what happens with that is if you have a full day, you have an opportunity cost associated with it because you're taking a day off work. You need a doctor, presumably present, one or two therapists, all the staff, the space. When you start to think about it, even though the medicine may not be incredibly expensive, you start to appreciate how the cost of delivering psychedelic-assisted therapies with the classics becomes incredibly expensive. And so one of the big opportunities we saw was, can you deliver the same type of experience, the same therapeutic outcomes with a truncated duration? And that's what we have with FT104. When you look at the preclinical work we've done with FT104, what we see is a molecule that's almost exactly like psilocybin in terms of what happens in the brain, as well as the subjective experience. But its duration of experience is about half that of psilocybin. So you look at all the upsides of psilocybin, because it is a tryptamine, with cutting the cost structure in half, by cutting the time frame in half, and that's what FT104 is.
Ronan, I wanted to ask you, so you have Field Trip Health and you see how people go through these treatments and what may be working and what isn't working as well. Is there like a key duration that you think is kind of the sweet spot that you're working towards on some of these drugs?
Yeah, exactly. So on the one hand, in terms of long experience, you've got LSD, which can be 10, 12, 14 hours, right? And the short end, you've got 5-MeO DMT, which when inhaled can be 15 minutes. There's no real science to it yet, but based on the people we've polled, who are experts, at least, they're based on their consideration, is something in the 2-hour duration seems like the sweet spot in terms of ensuring the emotional processing, the kind of ideation and awareness that comes out of the psychedelic experience, as well as giving enough time for the medicine to actually do the work on the receptors in the brain. That's what most people expect. We don't know. It really is something that will be discovered with time. But in the meantime, we think finding that balance between duration and experience in a 2-hour frame makes it accessible from a cost perspective, at least preferential to psilocybin. So you've got that upside relative to psilocybin, but what we'll see is the same therapeutic outcomes, ideally.
Fantastic. And with respect to targeted therapies, could you expand on the opportunity and addressable market of FT104 and with respect to TRD, which is treatment-resistant depression, and postpartum depression? I think those are the two that you guys are you're focusing on with FT104.
That's exactly right. I mean, you'll notice that within Field Trip, we like to do things a little bit differently with this integrated model, and we're doing things a little bit differently as well with our drug development strategy with FT104. So we've announced 2 lead indications: treatment-resistant depression and PPD, postpartum depression. The reason we've done that is because the factors I just talked about comparing FT104 to psilocybin are incredibly relevant to TRD. If you stack them up side by side, and a physician was looking at it, assuming safety profile and same therapeutic outcomes, it would make sense. And we polled our internal physicians and others, say, like, listen, if they're as safe, but it's cheaper to use FT104 relative to psilocybin, we'd start with FT104 as a first instance before going to psilocybin. So it makes a lot of sense to pursue TRD because that's where a lot of the evidence around tryptamines resides. But because TRD tends to be a more chronic condition, which would have repeat dosings, the clinical trials involved tend to be a little bit longer. So we actually developed FT104 with a view to postpartum depression, because what's unique about postpartum depression is that women are going to experience once, twice, maybe 3 times in their lives. And that's it. It's not a chronic condition, which means the clinical trials, as evidenced what we saw with the approval of Zulresso from Stage, can be done very quickly. And so we saw an opportunity to get to market quickly in an indication, PPD, that only has one approved medication right now, which is Zulresso, which is not being adopted for any number of reasons, solving a significant unmet need, probably an underreported unmet need. And we can get that to market very relatively quickly. And then we can follow on with TRD hopefully we'll see Compass Pathways have incredible success with their psilocybin. And then what we'll be coming out with within a year or so after that is a product that just we think is going to be more accessible and be able to reach more people because of the cost structures associated with it.
Great. Now, with respect to just these regulatory approval timelines, could you talk about upcoming milestones and just put some timelines around how investors can think about FT104 and with respect to the two target audiences?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are going to be in phase 1 clinical trials with FT104 at the beginning of next year, hoping to dose around the end of the first quarter. It may slip into the second quarter, with a view to getting into phase 2A for TRD early in 2023. What's nice about psychedelic drug development across the board, especially when you're working with tryptamines, is we can all take a pretty good indication that if psilocybin is effective, then other similar tryptamines are probably going to be equally as effective. So we're feeling quite confident for our phase 2As. But yeah, so we're hoping to launch phase 1 early next year. And this can all be found with more detail on our corporate deck, which you can get at meetfieldtrip.com. But phase 2A starting next year, phase 1 starting early next year, phase 2A starting in early 2023, and then getting into phase 2 and beyond, depending on which indication in the subsequent years after that, with a view to hopefully being in market for PPD sometime in late 2026, early 2027, which still seems like a long time away, but relative to most drug development efforts, it's actually quite expeditious.
Thank you. And so Field Trip recently initiated a second novel psychedelic program. You announced the discovery of this novel molecule. Could you expand on that program and treatment opportunities related to that?
Sure, exactly. So we have identified two major needs when it came to psychedelic drug development. Duration of action was the first one. The second one, and this isn't talked about very often, but when you're talking about most tryptamines, most psychedelics, frankly, many of them are a little bit promiscuous. The 5-HT2A receptor is the receptor in the brain that we believe causes the psychedelic experience. There's a 5-HT2B receptor, a serotonin receptor, which if it's agonized too much can actually create risks of valvulopathy, cardiac toxicity. Right. This is the big concern with microdosing regimes, that if you're taking small amounts of psychedelics every day for long periods of time, you may engender a risk associated with the 5-HT2B liability. And this could be true even on large doses that are done chronically. So it's not a major risk, don't get me wrong. It's not in any way intended to steer people away from psychedelic therapies. But as with anything, if we can increase the safety profile, that's net better, right? We don't want to have any issues with this. And so what we have with our 200 series is a molecule that we've found does not trigger the 5-HT2B serotonin receptor. So it's hitting the brain similar to psilocybin, the 5-HT2A receptor, similar to psilocybin. So we have the same kind of potency on that level, but in our preclinical work, it's not engaging the 5-HT2B. And so this makes it potentially, it's still very early days, but potentially makes it a more promising molecule for any kind of chronic treatments, whether that's repeated treatments for TRD, for example, or if we want to look at a microdosing protocol, which, there seems to be a lot of interest around. And I saw Paul Stamets just issued a study that I think got published in Nature around microdosing. This makes it a potentially ideal candidate for microdosing as well. So we're pretty excited about the potential of our first molecule within the 200 series. We're still iterating on it to see if we can find other molecules of similar structure with enhanced properties, but this first one certainly looks very promising.
That's fascinating, Ronan. Thank you for that understanding of what you guys are doing on Field Trip Discovery. Now, the unique aspect of Field Trip is that you have Field Trip Health, and this is, I think, very novel with respect to you have the drug side, but then you have almost like an active company that can provide feedback as well. It's fascinating. Just on Field Trip Health, you've established yourselves as a leader here. Could you talk about the pathway to expanding to 75 locations? Also, give us an idea of where you are right now. Just would love to, just get your state of the union of Field Trip Health, because this is really something unique for Field Trip.
Sure. So we're presently operating in Toronto, New York, LA, Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, Seattle, Fredericton, New Brunswick, and the Netherlands, with Vancouver opening imminently. We've got locations opening fairly shortly, I believe. I can't remember the list. I believe Washington, D.C., I think Connecticut. I don't remember. I'm speaking out of turn right now. There's too many kind of on the go for the top of my.
You got to
It's a good problem to have.
Man. You got to get a 76. You're not going to remember all of them. You'll never remember all of them.
Never going to remember. Also, having 2 young children means my brain isn't working. It's like Swiss cheese these days. And the results we're seeing out of our clinics are just remarkable. I actually genuinely believe, and this is a very unscientific assessment, so no one make any decisions on this, but I actually think the ketamine-assisted therapy protocols we're using in our field trip health centers are the single best depression treatment option available, bar none, right now. What we're seeing is, on average, out of those patients who responded to our follow-up survey, so it's not the whole universe, it's just a subset, but we're seeing on average that most people are seeing benefits going from severe depression scores to mild depression scores, and that benefit is sustained for 120 days post-treatment. So we're looking at 4 months where people go from severe to mild, and it's benefiting for that long, maybe even longer.
So just so I can confirm, right? So they come to field trip health.
Yeah.
They take ketamine, and then they're working with a therapist. Then they don't have to come back for that 120. Like they're not taking anything regularly after that. Am I understanding that correct? Just maybe you can help me understand that.
Yeah, so our protocol usually involves 4 to 6 ketamine-assisted therapy sessions over the course of a few weeks.
Okay.
So they would come in for those 4 to 6 sessions. After every 2 ketamine session, we do a pure integration session with no drug, no medicine, just pure cognitive behavioral therapy. And you do that 2 or 3 times. So 2 sessions plus an integration session over the course of, call it 3 to 4 weeks. And after that, we're seeing people's depression scores go from severe down to mild, and continuing on for 120 days. The nice thing about ketamine, I was a believer at early days that ketamine would be bypassed as psilocybin and MDMA come online, but I've actually changed my perspective. I think ketamine is going to form a foundational part of the future of psychedelic medicine because it's really easy to use first. With psilocybin and MDMA, it's strongly recommended that people go off their conventional treatments before trying those therapies. With ketamine, that's not a consideration. And so people can ease into a ketamine treatment option without having to change their existing practices, which means for those people who see benefits for 120 days, I don't know with certainty if they're not continuing to take their SSRIs or other antidepressants. They may be. I think some people come off. I think some people stay on. So can't say exactly like you said that like people aren't taking anything. Some people do continue to take their existing medications, but I still think it's fantastic. It's we're focused on the results and the outcomes more so than anything, and that's what we're seeing happen.
And you're going to get more information as you continue with this process, right? So you'll get the answers to these types of questions.
Absolutely. And all of this starts to feed back into our drug discovery efforts. Like, when you think about drug development and drug discovery, the biggest risks are, is it effective and is it safe? With most psychedelics, we know by and large, it's pretty effective. Is it safe? Again, with psychedelics, we know they're pretty safe overall. But what we don't really talk about is the commercialization risk and the regulatory approval risk. And that's where we get these really fantastic synergies between the 2 divisions, because while we're doing our clinical development, going to phase 1, phase 2 for FT104, for example, we can be working on the therapeutic protocols to pair with FT104 to really make sure we have that great integration, those synergies in terms of our clinical trials, so we can maximize the likelihood of success of approval for FT104 and subsequent drugs. At the same time, the other challenge and the other risk that people really aren't talking about with psychedelic therapies, because we just haven't got there yet, is the commercialization risk. By building out this infrastructure, we know that as soon as FT104 or even Compass 360, doesn't really matter, as soon as they get to approval, there's going to be infrastructure designed to actually help these roll out.
Great point.
You see that with like Spravato and Zulresso, they didn't really have that infrastructure. And so their rollouts have been a bit lumpy. And so we're doing it for the benefit of the entire industry, don't get me wrong, but also for FT104 and our future development as well. Super exciting, Ronan. I really want to thank you for illuminating us on all the things Field Trip's doing, both in Field Trip Discovery and Field Trip Health. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you again for the next Psychedelics Con. That's Ronan Levy from Field Trip Health.
And thanks, guys. Don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break, and we're coming back with HAVN Life. All right, we're back. Next, you're going to hear from Tim Moore. He's the CEO of HAVN Life. All right, we're back. We have Tim Moore, CEO of HAVN Life. Tim, welcome to Psychedelics Con.
Hey, it's good to see you guys. How's it going today?
Doing great.
Good. Got a big day, big day. Tim, thank you for joining us.
Yeah. So maybe I just want to kick it off because, HAVN has kind of a unique business model where you have your HAVN retail and then you have your HAVN labs. Can you talk us through kind of the two pillar business model that you have and why two at once?
Yeah. So they do seem different, but they're highly integrated in that they both support cognitive health and human performance. One using restricted compounds or controlled compounds like psilocybin, and the other using other mushrooms that aren't restricted but still have a function on the body. And so we're able to use our science across both pieces of that. And although the functional mushroom and nutritional supplements is very much a traditional packaged goods business, it still benefits from our psychedelics business and the expertise that we have with our science team. So the functional mushroom business is already in revenue and building that up, and that's going to help to support the work that we need to do on the psychedelic side, because as you know, we're still a few years away from psychedelics being in wide distribution commercially.
Yeah. No, so I wanted to ask, you mentioned research that there's cross-pollination there. Can you talk a bit about, do you have separate research groups, or is there a lot of information flow between the two groups, the research that's going on there?
Yeah, so there is a lot of flow that goes between the two groups, because how chemicals act on the brain and the way the brain functions is consistent, whether it's a psychedelic or whether it's a functional mushroom that's having an effect on let's say focus or anxiety. It's still a brain benefit, and so that work across our science team is common. Where it's different is working with restricted compounds is a very specific skill set, and navigating the regulatory takes different than working on nutritional supplements, which is a pretty well-worn path as far as getting approvals of labels and claims, etc. So that's where there's a little bit of a difference in our teams and who works on those two things.
Fantastic. Yeah, with HAVN Labs, Tim, I think you have some big news today. Would you, obviously you guys are pressed it, but could you talk about, give us the news, and then we can talk more about what HAVN Lab does, but I think it's quite significant.
Yeah. So as we've talked about before, we're currently growing mushrooms in Jamaica, where they fall under the Ministry of Agriculture as a functional food. But magically, when they cross the border into Canada, the United States, they become a controlled substance. So the challenge is, how do you get from Jamaica into Canada or the US? And we were successful at the end of last week getting our first export out of Jamaica, import into Canada to our licensed partner here, who's one of our supply agreement customers. So we were able to get that first shipment in, and it provides proof of concept that we can have our supply chain be contiguous from Jamaica into Canada. We're now working on getting an export from Jamaica into the United States, and we've started work on the UK as well.
So this is quite significant in terms of, like, these regulatory hurdles, I assume, are not a walk in the park. Like, there's a lot of work that goes behind getting it to this point. And and that was one of my questions, just maybe talking specifically about natural psilocybin versus synthetic. I know you have a strong view there, but I would love for you to share that. Yeah.
So let me deal with both of those things. First, the regulatory side of it. Everything in this space is hard. It's really complicated. There's a lot of rules, and it's an important distinction. Psilocybin's not illegal. It's just very highly regulated. Like alcohol, tobacco, and guns are highly regulated, right? So if you can navigate the path, as we've been able to do and we've demonstrated, then it actually becomes a barrier to entry. And we kind of embrace the rules, because we spend a lot of time and energy and frankly a lot of money in order to get through all the regulatory challenges to get product out of Jamaica and into Canada and into the hands of the researchers that need it. So everything's complicated. Similarly, in the US, it's very complicated. You need a permit from the DEA every time you move psilocybin. But like I said, the rules are complicated in Canada, they're complicated in the US, and they're equally complicated in the UK. And so we pride ourselves on having put together the intellectual capital to have navigated that. And you asked about the natural versus synthetic psilocybin. Our thesis when we launched HAVN just about 2 years ago was that there was demand for naturally derived psilocybin. Most of the researchers around the world today are using synthetic psilocybin, which in simple terms is a molecule that's grown on E. coli in a petri dish. And it has a few disadvantages. One is it's really expensive. It's hard to get. It's $7,000 to $10,000 a gram are the prices we're hearing. So that's like $7 million a kilogram. So yeah, it's expensive stuff, and naturally derived can be cultivated and harvested for a lot less. The second thing is that the naturally derived provides the opportunity for all of the molecules that are in the mushroom, some 300 compounds that are in the psilocybin mushroom. We believe it's naive to think that only the psilocybin itself has an effect on the brain. There's benefits on the others. And then the third thing is patient preference. Some patients that are seeking psychedelic assisted therapy don't want a synthetic molecule. They want the natural. And you guys are aware of, a few years ago, synthetic THC came into the cannabis universe and it was going to disrupt the whole business. Nobody's going to build greenhouses anymore. Well, guess what? That didn't happen because the users in the community want a naturally derived product. They want something from the plant. And we're seeing the same thing with mushroom derived compounds like psilocybin.
It's really fascinating that just that aspect of synthetic cannabis versus synthetic synthetic psilocybin. That's a real great analog.
That's a good example.
So just talking about in cannabis, you talk about the entourage effect. Is that something similar in psilocybin? I think you're alluding to it.
Yeah, so it hasn't been clinically proven, but there's lots of anecdotal evidence. People that have had both experiences, both a natural product as well as a synthetic product, tell you it's a different experience. Actually measuring those differences is something that has to be proven in clinical trials. One of our supply agreement partners has already decided that they're going to do side-by-side of naturally derived and synthetic so that they can actually validate those differences. So we've been talking to them about that. And as we get further down the road here, there'll be more news on that.
So I guess my question goes back to HAVN Retail. That's generating the revenue now. Maybe you could help investors. What do you plan for that part of the business over, say, the next 12 months? Are you rolling it out to different locations? Like, what's the strategy there?
Yeah, so the strategy is to scale it. I mean, we've launched our first SKUs. We're developing new products to go into that. We acquired some IP on a product, a mushroom-based product that has benefits for traumatic brain injury and concussion. It's currently being used by 18 professional sports teams as part of their brain health program. So we're rolling that out under the HAVN Life name. We're expanding partnerships. We recently announced a white label partnership with a company in Australia that they're going to be our distributor for Australia, New Zealand, and China. And so we're looking forward to getting that shipment out the door in early 2022. So it's just a matter of scaling the business. We're on Amazon.ca and Well.ca for Canadian consumers. We're working on getting on Amazon.com in the US. On our own website, yourhavenlife.com, we're shipping to Canada and the US already.
Now, are there regulatory issues to getting on Amazon.com, or is it more just competitive conversations, like business decisions?
No, you need a label that's compliant with their standards. Not only do you have to meet the FDA standards, but you have to meet Amazon standards. They're if you've ever done business with Whole Foods, they have their own standards that are even higher than the general standards. But yeah, with Amazon, we're pretty far down the path with them. We expect that we'll get on the Amazon site before the end of this calendar year.
So, Tim, just with respect to the nutraceutical market, you guys have 7 different mushroom formulations. Now, could you give us an idea of the market potential for functional mushrooms? Because, when I talk to friends, it's still like, people are still taking like Centrum. You know what I mean? Like, there's an evolution here that I think you guys are at the forefront. There aren't many competitors here. Talk about that landscape and what you're seeing.
So the best thing here is that we're leveraging a very well-established consumer behavior. 74% of consumers take a nutritional supplement on a regular basis. So I take tart cherry for my gout and glucosamine and chondroitin for my arthritis. So for me to say, hey, I'm going to start taking a reishi or a shaga or something else for anxiety or for focus or whatever, is a really easy step. So it's easy for people to add it to their daily regimen of behavior. And so that makes it easier to build the customer base out. The second thing is functional mushrooms are the fastest growing segment of nutritional supplements, and they're projected to be like $35 billion business on a global basis. So, the nutritional supplement business in Canada is several $billion. And so, we don't need to get a huge market share to have a fairly significant business. So we're excited about the prospects there. We're not yet providing guidance on sales because it's still too early. But we hope that in 2022 we'll be able to start providing guidance to the market on quarterly sales.
And it's fair to say right now, Tim, that in terms of the competitive landscape, that it's still very nascent, right? Like maybe just comment on that.
Yeah, so there are a lot of mushroom products on the market, but we set ourselves apart by the quality that we're manufacturing at. So we're using extracts rather than just ground mushrooms. And the extracts have a higher concentration of actives, making it much easier to dose and have a much higher bioavailability. In fact, some people can't even digest mushrooms. So by using the extract, which is highly soluble, you increase the ability to have the benefit. In fact, we've had people that have used our mushroom mix product say that 20 minutes after they've taken it, they actually feel something. So it's that high bioavailability and the quality that sets us apart, as well as having the scope and scale of advertising and promotion to build a brand on a national and international basis.
Tim, HAVN has recently acquired Bennett's Choice, and Bennett's Choice is unique. It's interesting. The product, could you talk about the product and its relation to brain health and sports? Because this is a very hot topic right now. Maybe you could just expand on Bennett's Choice and how that fits into the HAVN portfolio.
So with Bennett's Choice, we went from 7 SKUs to 11 SKUs. There were 4 products in that portfolio we picked up. And the entrepreneur that established it, Matthew Bennett, has joined us as an education manager as well to help us, prepare materials for consumers and train retailers and so on. And Matthew's background, he has a degree in naturopathy, and he's a sports injury therapist. He actually worked for several professional sports teams on their medical team. And through that, he saw a lot of brain injury issues. And so he spent a number of years developing this formula and patenting it, and was able to get several teams. I mentioned earlier, there's 18 professional sports teams across NBA, the NHL, NFL, and the AHL that are using this product. And so brain injury is a huge issue. I mean, it's not, people think like it's hockey and football, but gosh, there's so many sports and so many activities where people get brain injuries, and it's really a sad thing. I mean, you take a look, you hear these stories of what's happened to people that have had brain injuries, and one of my sons had multiple concussions, and I lived through that with him. But so we're excited that we can bring relief to people, and we're looking forward to building that business out even more.
And we're definitely in a different world right now, compared to like 15, 20 years ago. Just the awareness of brain health, and especially in, let alone contact sports you think of, but broader than that, it's very different.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you talk to some of the old timers that played hockey when I was a kid, guys like Bobby Hull and so on, they'd wake up in a hotel room after a game and not know what happened. Well, now they've got the whole, head injury protocol where you go to the room and you have to clear yourself before you can go back into the game. And part of that is driven by the psyche of the sports, the professional athlete that says, hey, put me in, coach, I'm fine. And maybe they're not fine. So I think that there's been a lot of work on making sure that people pay attention to head injuries, and that there's improved protocols for identifying them and for treating them. And now we can be a part of that.
Fantastic.
Hey, Tim, this has been a great conversation to understand, I think, kind of the dual prong model that you have, which is a bit unique in the space. So, I mean, I know I personally learned a lot more about HAVN, and we're going to be watching you closely. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's great. I hope the rest of your conference goes really well. Appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks
Tim.
very much.
Appreciate it.
All right, everyone, stay tuned. Quick break, and then we got PharmaTher. All right, everyone. Welcome back to Grizzle Psychedelics Con. If you're watching this on social, smash the like, smash the retweet, let everyone know we're live. We got a stacked lineup. It's just rolling. We're keeping on rolling. Next, you're going to hear from PharmaTher. All right, we're back. And our next interview, he was on at our last Psychedelics Con. It was one of my favorite interviews. One of the nicest CEOs in psychedelics, also one of the most excited about the psychedelic opportunity.
Absolutely.
It's Fabio Chianelli of PharmaTher. Fabio, welcome back.
Thank you, Scott. Tom, thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
As usual. I love this conference because it's different from the other one. So this is, I get to be yourself. So, which I don't know if it's a good thing, but whatever.
Everyone knows what they're getting. That's what it's all about.
Man,
That's right.
You know what? Yeah. That's what the charm that people come for. You know, we're dishing out real deal, man. You know, we started with Christian. He had a wall of MDMA. I'm gonna come there. We're gonna take that.
There you go.
No, yeah, it was a piece of art.
Better. I got two hats there. That's all.
Oh, the hats!
I love it.
Yeah.
And we got a new. I gotta send this new one for that shelf right there.
Yeah,
Which
one more.
Oh, okay, cool.
GRZZ. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, Fabio, thank you, man.
So, it looks like PharmaTher is busy. You got a lot of things going on 2022. Maybe you start things off, take people through what's coming down the pipe for you guys. What are you working on?
Yeah, like I mean, just to even for the new viewers and whatnot that have don't know about PharmaTher. I mean, we're a clinical stage psychedelics company that are focused on developing novel uses and delivery forms of prescription-based psychedelics, such as ketamine, for mental health, neurological, and pain disorders. So we're actually in a phase 2 clinical study using ketamine to treat Parkinson's disease. And we're also advancing our microneedle delivery patch technology to deliver psychedelics and that will be bringing into human clinical studies next year. So with our patch, we're also partnering with other companies who are looking to better deliver their psychedelic drug or drugs of their choosing or in their pipeline at their desire, what we call in biotech a pharmacokinetic profile, to get the best therapeutic value that your drug can have. And then lastly, which we kind of are percolating, our last program, which you'll see in 2022 becoming more mainstream, is we're commercializing our own ketamine IV product that will be used in the thousands of ketamine clinics in the US and internationally, if you will, and also in hospitals to use as a treatment for these mental health disorders, which are being used now, and pain, even whether it's in post or perioperative surgeries as well. So as you can see, we have a number of programs, incredible developments, if you will, that are gearing up what I like to say is for monetization in the next 12 months.
Yeah, so I guess on the microneedle patch, that looks very prospective and it's interesting to me. And I saw that you did sign a partnership with Revive related to the microneedle patch. Could you maybe tell us a bit about what does the partnership let you do? And is this the monetization model that you think makes the most sense for the microneedle patch?
Yeah, absolutely. So we recently completed our proof of concept using our microneedle patch for psilocybin. We showed that we could deliver psilocybin, actually have it stable enough, and be able to penetrate the skin and have it intradermally delivered appropriately at a flexible desired dosing rate, whether you needed a psilocybin to be delivered, say, within 24 hours, in a 24-hour period, if you will, longer or shorter, whatever the case is. So we decided to, as our focus is more on the ketamine side, we are in partnering mode to deliver or to partner with our microneedle patch for a number of psychedelics, using our microneedle patch. So Revive, seeing that they had interest in psilocybin, our collaboration is more earlier stage in the sense of looking towards developing towards an IND enabling studies to allow for clinical studies for next year. And we're discussing now a definitive agreement, which is in the form of a license agreement. It's just a more appropriate word of saying definitive, but a license agreement to determine the terms for the development and commercial terms of the agreement, such as specifically upfront payments, milestones, and royalties. So right now, with that, going with that partnership, and once you have a license agreement, that all set the pave way for other development deals that we'll be doing with other companies, which were early stage discussions with a number of psychedelic companies, in fact, that are looking to seek to deliver their compounds in our delivery system. And we're going to continue partnering our delivery system with all these psychedelic drugs. However, not with our ketamine, because ketamine is our bread and butter for the company.
So kind of partnering, does that let you kind of move ahead in getting to commercialization instead of waiting for the whole FDA approval process to go through, then going to partners?
Yeah, for a company, it's monetizing. You're getting an ROI on the research and development that you're doing with your microneedle patch. Now, not to say that you still have to go through the flow of the FDA regulatory pathway, but the companies we're partnering with will take on that financial and clinical risk, if you will. We're a solution. We become essentially the solution provider to deliver their drugs in their desired profile that they'd like. And the economics behind that for the company is, definitely an upfront payment. When we have milestones, milestones come in both form of development milestones. So if you reach a certain phase, let's say you go into first in human clinical studies, then unlock a milestone payment there. Get to a phase 3 study, you get to unlock a milestone payment there. Get FDA approval, another milestone payment there, and then once it's commercial, then you have that tail of the royalties going in. So, and then really the risk reduction is minimal from the PharmaTher side, and as well as you get the economic benefits. albeit it's a smaller slice of the pie, but it's a free slice, if you will.
Yeah. Just on the microneedle patch, is that fully patented, or is that something you're working towards? You'd like to have it fully patented?
No, it's fully patented. we've licensed the rights for the microneedle patch, so you can have it whether it be in a reservoir, or hollow, or microneedle filled patches. We've licensed from the Queensland University of Belfast, that's in Ireland. So Professor Ryan Donnelly, who's a very well-known leader in the microneedle space, we have the exclusive license to develop and commercialize, and also sub-license to other partners for the rights with a microneedle patch in psychedelics. So it's not the entire in the entire field of uses of all these other drugs, but specifically in psychedelics. So any controlled substances.
You have it locked down.
Oh yes, yeah, and it's patent. They're all granted patents. That's correct.
And just to remind everyone that the advantage of the microneedle, it's the dosing side, like just versus oral, or maybe you can just re-emphasize.
Yeah, at a high level, I mean, the reality is with the patch is twofold. So our mission with the patch is to have these psychedelics be used as a take-home, to be used as a prescription product for individuals to use at home, right? And what the key is this patch could allows you to do is that certain psychedelic compounds, whether it's a drug loading where you have to deliver a lot more drugs, the microneedle patch will be useful. But a lot of these psychedelics you don't need a lot, like MDMA, it's very small amounts, right? But what the trouble is that companies are having is, how do you titrate that dose to allow it to have the best therapeutic effect? So you do a bolus dump, meaning like an injectable IV form. That's great. Now, but is that the PK profile you want, where you have this spike and then this tail off? Or do you want something where you may want a higher peak and then a sustained release? That patch will allow that to happen, because what you can do is now modify how the drug is delivered into the body at a rate that is required for the drug to achieve the best result for that specific indication you have, right? Now, the idea is that if you want something to be taken at home is, well, how can you ensure that it doesn't get abused or diverted or whatnot, used for recreational use? Well, that's our solution. And I said this in the last conference, is that, our patch acts like a diaper, right? So if a baby pees in this diaper, the urine, it gets into the fibers of the diaper, and you can't extract that liquid. We have that in the same ways that you can't extract that compound out of the reservoir itself, because it's built into the fiber, the hydrogels, it's cross-linked. So it actually becomes inert, it becomes useless afterwards, because if you have to extract it, you won't get any benefit from that. So that's what we're trying to achieve. That's the actual barrier from psychedelics becoming mainstream, because just imagine, FDA doesn't want to have no more blood like they had with fentanyl and morphine, like what they have, it's just out there in the field, right? So now they're being very careful. We're solving that problem, but more so, you'll see with biotech companies, like even Compass, right? You'll see they had really good results, but it's the dosing. They can't really fine tune that. And what's that next development, the next clinical study going to look like to make sure they can achieve the appropriate dosage form? And that may come from how they dose a patient. Maybe they'll have to have multiple doses within that dosing regimen to achieve that PK profile that they want. Our patch can solve that. So that's at a high level. Yeah,
Fabio, like the way I think about it is, right now we're thinking about it just in terms of it's very one-dimensional, and the patch provides, like, it gives it another dimension about thinking about delivery of this medication.
Flexibility. That's what it does. It gives the flexibility for companies to say, hey, we have it. And it's not even the existing, all these other new chemical entities that they're developing and whatnot. They're coming to find, and within the research, that this is a great drug, but how do we get this into a person's body the way we want to achieve that desired effect? So it becomes a drug delivery solution. Now, is our patch the ultimate solution? By far, no. I would never pitch that way. But we can solve a lot of these problems, if not all of them. And if it's the ideal for those said drugs to be used in a patch form, we're covering all, not only from a clinical or therapeutic value, but also from a regulatory. Because what good is it if the FDA doesn't want to see this drug being used for at-home treatment or whatnot? I could envision like a psilocybin, where you go to the clinic, you take your psilocybin, which is basically a bolus dose, and then how do you achieve where you can have like a nice tailwind of a psilocybin dose that you can take your patient and let him or her go home with something that can also have an after effect, but have without the psychedelic effect, but a nice dose, a sustained release dose, so to achieve a better therapeutic result. Well, the patch
Almost
can
like a
achieve that as well.
Almost like a
Microdosing.
microdose tail, right? Like that,
Yes,
just
100%.
got it.
And that's why it's flexible in that stuff. So it doesn't necessarily have to be. It's not in fact meant to be competing with what the intention is, like what Compass is doing. It actually could be complementary to what they're doing, and it could also extend the psilocybin franchise for even other indications, especially when you get to the rare disorders with more chronic uses of it, right? The patch makes more sense. If you need something that's in and out, maybe go to the clinic, get your psychedelic experience. You have all the benefits there. Great, perfect. But a lot when you look at it from a drug, from a therapeutic perspective, and the ability to treat a number of indications, there's a whole gap that needs to be filled, and the patch can solve that.
You know, I had a question while we have you here, because you're the CEO, you're the man who runs everything. I wanted to see, what do you envision PharmaTher to look like? You know, do you want revenue to come from FDA approved drugs? You want it to come from supplying drugs to others, microneedle sales? Like, what would you envision PharmaTher to look like down the road?
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, it'd be nice to have an approved drug and sell it, but in reality, it does take a long time, right? Like, there's no end if or but. And if you look with PharmaTher, and you've been following us for the past year, it was really a foundational year for PharmaTher, because we planted all these seeds over the last 12 months to allow this, like I call this, beautiful psychedelic garden, if you will, that we're nurturing to blossom for next year. And we believe next year is going to be a breakout year for PharmaTher, because we have these number of value-creating milestones that we're going to be attaining. Like, we'll be completing our phase 2 study and initiating our phase 3 study for ketamine in Parkinson's disease. We'll have our phase 2 clinical study for ALS completed, which we've already received FDA orphan drug designation for. In fact, we'll have our phase 2 clinical study for a ketamine patch to treat these multiple mental health and disorders such as treatment-resistant depression and even suicidal ideation. But when it comes to commercialization, right, there's actually two business units that we have in commercialization. One is our ketamine IV product that will be commercialized, which will be used in these thousands of ketamine clinics across the US, as well as in hospitals, as an ideal non-opioid treatment, but also for ketamine clinics who are using it for pain, for depression, for all these other uses. But they'll have their own branded version of that we can offer. So it's a massive opportunity for us, a selling proposition. But in addition to that, and with that, as well as our international expansion of selling our ketamine product, but also from the next business unit is our microneedle patches and our partnering strategy, where we can partner with these said companies and enter into license agreements where we get upfront milestones and royalty payments, and that commercialized early term while we're developing our longer term value creating profile product pipeline in our ketamine patch, which we would see to come to market in several years from now. That's with the FDA approval, and that becomes more of that extension. So you could figure like a revenue curve and then just uplift even more. So so it's a really you'll see in next year is a big breakout year for PharmaTher, and I'm happy because we have all the pieces in place that we put together this year, and now we're just all our job is right now is to execute on our milestone.
It sounds like you're being pragmatic. You have those businesses that'll generate revenue to keep you going until you can have those go through the FDA pipeline and have that big revenue bump come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, just to sum it up quickly before we jump off, I mean, really, when I say truly 2022 is going to be a breakout year for PharmaTher, because you're going to have a collection of phase 2 and phase 3 clinical programs. We'll have a commercialization of our ketamine product and our microneedle patch. And best of all, we're funded to get to these milestones. And as you know, there are levels in biotech, right? We're growing fast. We're becoming a full-fledged commercial therapeutic solution provider with our ketamine and our microneedle patch, right? So, and I like to always say, like, I take it from my love from mixed martial arts, and I quote a fighter that I truly love with competing is Michael Chandler. It's like, at the end of the day, in 2022 and 2008, I'm going to see you at the top, right? Because biotech's always a battle, and each day's a brawl, right? And that's why I wake up, get excited, battling each day to make PharmaTher success. I'm the largest shareholder of PharmaTher, not only founder. So, but the vision's clear, and right now it's all about executing, and that's what we're doing, and that's what we've done and continue to do so.
Fabio,
for you.
Man, it's always a pleasure.
This is a CEO you want in your corner.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Going all 10 rounds.
Yeah, confidence.
That's why I have, like I said before, I have Jon Snow here. No matter how many times you stab me, I'll still come back alive, right? So
I love it.
That's it. It's always a reminder.
Well, Fabio, thanks for being on. Always love to see you.
Thank you.
That was PharmaTher, everybody.
Thank you for the invite. Take care, guys.
All right. Another quick break, everyone. Don't go anywhere. Smash that like, smash that retweet, and we're going to be right back with Mindset Pharma. Don't go anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Grizzle Psychedelics Con. We are bringing you the best, the biggest, the Grizzle Psychedelics Con. We are excited to have our next guest, James Lanthier from Mindset Pharma. All right, welcome back. James, thank you for joining us. Nice to have you on.
Great to be back. Nice to see you both.
Thank you. So Mindset Pharma, it's a unique company, unique play. So you're working a lot with next generation psychedelics. Could you help investors understand what that means?
Yeah, so it's some big, fancy words, but it's really pretty simple. Like I like to say we're in the March of Science business, so really what we're doing is we're applying the tools of modern biotech to these amazing naturally occurring compounds. To try to make better optimized medications that are going to be that are going to work better as prescription medications, are going to be safer, more predictable. There's a bunch of different ways that we can improve on them, we think. And really, this is no different than like the work that the German chemists did in the 19th century to go from, the bark of the willow tree through a bunch of intermediate chemical steps to eventually get to aspirin, which is, a predictable, safe, gold standard drug that was the gold standard painkiller for, over 100 years.
As opposed to me. As opposed to me eating half a tree and,
yes,
and having some side effects,
and vomiting everything in your stomach out, but being cured of your pain. Yeah,
you guys take your aspirins. I'm gonna go here gnaw on this tree for an hour or
exactly.
It might take you longer than that.
But that's probably the best explanation of understanding what next generation means. It means it's not that you're like in another solar system, you're taking what has an impact and then getting it down to basically what works in the fastest time possible to cure my headache or whatever other ails there are.
Yeah, or just whatever is going to work best to help you with the fewest side effects, and we're making some small, very careful changes to the structure of these molecules to try to create better drugs. That's it.
Makes sense.
Now, can you give investors maybe a brief background on, your mindset? So MindSet has the mindset to go after a psychedelics opportunity via kind of like an IP first approach. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So very simply, I would say, like, if you view psychedelic medications as, ultimately being, one tool in kind of modern medicine, future medicine, chest to go after, curing mood and neuropsychiatric disorders, then the way to approach that is to follow a typical biotech pathway, and it really all starts with IP. Intellectual property gives all the participants the incentives to try to make the investments that they need to in order to get these drugs to market. I think ultimately big pharma is going to play a huge role in this space because they have all of the functions that you need in order to get a drug from an idea through a lab, through the regulatory process, and to end consumers. It was always our view from the very beginning at MindSet that big pharma, or call them whatever you want, the pharma industry, wouldn't have any interest in jumping right into drugs that were in the public domain, into generic drugs, and that's what psilocybin is. Psilocybin's been around forever. Most psychedelic drugs were discovered, at least in the Western world, in the early part of the 20th century. So they've all been in the public domain for decades. And it was our view that, if we could create new drugs that would enjoy full, I call it composition of matter IP rights, and that were differentiated, that offered up some improvements over, the original first generation drugs, then those would be the drugs that the pharma industry could really, get behind, because they'd be improved, and there'd also really be an opportunity to create real defensible margins around them in a way that's just not possible with psilocybin or with a formulation of psilocybin, where, we think within a couple of years, once Compass gets its approved, there's going to be, a tremendous amount of generic competition in that space.
Gotcha. Now, I remember when I read this, it raised my eyebrows that you guys have researched and synthesized 100 plus psychedelic compounds. That's a significant library. So you've done that. How do you narrow it down to compounds you want to move forward with?
Yeah, so this is really where the art and the science of drug development meet, and this is where the importance of having a team that's both really skilled and frankly really experienced in drug development really comes into play. So of our two scientific co-founders, we really have kind of both sides of the drug discovery, effort, on the team. Dr. Malik Slassi is our medicinal chemist. He's designed, hundreds of drugs, many of which have gone through FDA approval to market. Joseph Arujar's our behavioral pharmacologist, real expert at screening out, central nervous system drugs. So really, we start with this this is a funnel where we try to give ourselves as many, shots on goal for getting to a successful drug. That's why we've screened such a large number of compounds. But then it's all about, screening out the ones that are less likely to be safe and to meet these different goals that we have for these drugs. And you do that through a variety of different tests. You do that through tests in dishes, essentially in a lab, where you're watching how they're binding to certain cells and activating them, and then through animal modeling, some predictable animal models where that have been established, where you can objectively say, well, okay, if you see a drug do X in a mouse or a rat, then what does that mean in a human? So we're going through that process with all of our 4 families right now.
Interesting. Okay, so that takes us through kind of the first step, and I'll take it a bit further. Could you help investors understand the process where once you're at the point of filing a patent, do you plan to advance the research yourself, partner with someone, or would you just kind of patent it and then sell it?
Yeah, so for us, actually, the whole process really, once we get past the idea phase, it really starts with a patent. That's critically important. Mindset's patent portfolio has some of the earliest, filing dates in the industry. The date in which you file your first patent is incredibly important, gives you priority date. And then if you're in a space where there's a certain amount of competition, like Mindset is, having an early patent filing date is incredibly important. So that's where it starts for us. But really what I would say is, we're really not trying to reinvent the wheel. As I, mentioned at the outset, I think that ultimately, the larger pharma, industry is going to play a really, important role. We think that if you're a junior biotech company that is trying to, raise all the capital you need, hire everybody at every different function to get a drug to market, we think that is really a really tough road to go. So our whole model is to advance the drugs to a certain point where we've been able to prove through some of that early testing, that we have some really promising candidates, and then partner with groups that actually have that infrastructure and that expertise in taking a drug, all the way through clinical trials, like human trials, to market. So that's the model.
So kind of like a high-end farm system, in the sense that you're always you're always on the hunt, as opposed there's always there's always exploration. I guess
that's the word.
Exploration, right?
Exploration.
It's that classic, in the mining world, you have great explorers. They never stop exploring, right? They never go to, because that asset, there's a development company that's much more well suited to actually getting to it. And you guys are,
yeah, that's what you do best.
Exactly. And that is what makes this sector so exciting. These psychedelic drugs really are, in a lot of ways, even though they've been around for a long time, some of them have been known for a while, they're really kind of the undiscovered continent of neuroscience. So over the last, many decades, as pharma companies have done screening work, if they came upon a drug, a compound that was psychoactive, psychedelic, they screened it out. They didn't want to have anything to do with it because those drugs were illegal. And there's hundreds of psychedelic drugs beyond just kind of the big 5 or 6 that everybody knows about. And all of these hundreds of drugs and beyond really, to us, represent opportunities for us to apply what we've learned about psychedelic drug design to them to create, new optimized versions. So in our minds, the 4 families that we have now, incredibly exciting. We think they're, offer some advantages over first generation drugs, but there's, tremendous opportunities to go on and continue to discover and develop, new drugs. The ideal psychedelic medication may, yet to have been discovered. So there's huge amounts of opportunity out there.
So you have lots of molecules you're looking at, but you have narrowed it down to some lead candidates. one in particular, MSP 1014. Could you just talk us through where you are in the investigation process and in FDA trials for that?
Yeah, so MSP 1014, we're finalizing our IND enabling studies plan. Now we think that it could be in clinical trials by the end of next year. It's really a drug that we see kind of competing directly against psilocybin. We kind of think of it in our matrix as kind of a second generation psilocybin. We've been able to see some really compelling safety data, which we think really is an underappreciated concern with psychedelic drugs, because generally speaking, recreationally, they don't get used that often. And there haven't been that many clinical studies about psychedelic drugs. And we've seen some really I'd say concerning, body temperature data with a reduction in body temperature in animals with psilocybin that we don't see with 1014. And 1014 also is actually, ironically, it's also a stronger drug that from what we've seen than psilocybin. So we think it definitely has a potential, favorable role to play in the market, as a kind of a stronger, safer psilocybin.
Cool. So there's one that I really wanted to ask. You guys have talked a bit about your cost advantage in the past when synthesizing psilocybin. Could you just expand more on how you're able to do that?
Yes. So if you're going to create a new drug, you also have to figure out how you're going to manufacture the drug. And that's how we kind of frankly stumbled on this innovation. So some of our early drugs, early families are structurally, fairly similar to psilocybin. So this was something that Dr. Slassy invented in the course of figuring out how he was going to synthesize family 1. So he got really immersed in the literature around psilocybin chemical synthesis. To be clear, this is something I think a lot of people don't quite understand. You can't extract psilocybin from mushrooms, at scale or biosynthesize it at scale. Really, the only way that clinical trial psilocybin, so pharmaceutical grade psilocybin, gets manufactured today is via chemical synthesis, and the standard is a 5-step process, a 5-step chemical synthesis process. The process that Dr. Slassy invented gets to psilocybin in a lot fewer steps than 5. And that's really where the cost savings come in. So we've tested that with one supplier. We're just in the process of finalizing an agreement with a new supplier that's domestically based to synthesize a kilogram of psilocybin. But based on what we've seen so far, even at a much smaller scale, we're able to get to psilocybin at a fraction of what we think is kind of the standard producer price today. There's wide variations in what people will charge for psilocybin, but true pharmaceutical grade psilocybin, really you're going to pay, anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 a gram. So we're quite confident we can get there in for a lot cheaper.
Now, just on MSP 1014, just that your lead candidate there, could you just talk about timeline there and how we should think about what the pathway is there?
Yeah, I think we'll be announcing some more timelines around our regulatory pathway for 1014 in the next quarter. And we think that we can get to clinical trials or to start clinical trials by the end of next year. But then 1014 is a new drug, so it's not psilocybin. So it'll have to follow the same FDA approval pathway as any other new drug. So to go all the way through the 3 phases of clinical trials, which we plan to do in the USA. So you're looking at a multi-year process to get it approved. But what I want to be clear about is that for Mindset, we are seeing lots of interest from lots of different groups in terms of partnerships. It seems like in the last really year or so, the light bulb's gone off, and a lot of folks, different pharma biotech groups, and they are all there's quite a number of them now looking for, novel drugs to bring to market. So, Mindset's not going to have to wait kind of 5 years for a 1014 approval to get to some, commercialization milestones.
So before, I know we could get lots of things to discuss, but could you talk just final points on your DMT drug candidates and
Sure.
other new entities, just to wrap up, because I know there's a lot in the pipeline. You got over 100, so let's talk about what's making you guys excited.
Yeah, so family 4, our fourth family of new drugs, is our family of DMT and 5-MeO, next generation DMT and 5-MeO DMT compounds. That's a class of drugs that has the market really, really excited because DMT and 5-MeO are both really short-acting drugs, and that really is kind of seen to be as one of the shortcomings of psilocybin: much shorter trip, more efficient, less time in clinic. So we've seen some really exciting results out of that family. That's a family that's really attracted a lot of interest to Mindset from a range of different groups, and where we're still seeing, very short duration. So anywhere from, 15 minutes to an hour, but some really compelling safety data when we profile our drugs in animals versus 5-MeO DMT in animals, where we see a lot of signs of serotonin syndrome with 5-MeO DMT. Serotonin syndrome you more commonly get with antidepressants, excess of serotonin in your body, whole range of unpleasant symptoms, can even be fatal in some cases. We don't see any signs of serotonin syndrome with Mindset's family 4, which is really incredible. And if we're able to get a safer 5-MeO DMT drug to market, I think there's a potentially huge market for that, given how short the duration is and how strong profound the psychedelic trip is.
Wow.
James, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
That's Mindset Pharma, James Lanthier. Thank you. And Scott, who we got next?
All right. Coming up after a short break, we got Psyched Wellness. Don't go anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Grizzle Psychedelics Con. If you're enjoying all the good insight from the leaders of the industries, please hit that like button, give it the retweet. Next up, we have Psyched Wellness, Jeff Stevens. Jeff, welcome to Grizzle Psychedelics Con. Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So the focus of Psyched Wellness is around the research and development of a psychedelic mushroom called Erica. I'm butchering everything.
Have him pronounce.
Yes.
Flyagaric.
Flyagaric. That's the word. I guess there's a formal word for it. It's Amanita muscaria. Hey, pull that up again. Let me see that.
There you go. Yeah, I bring props. I make it easy for you guys.
We love props.
So could you tell us what has led you to this specific species and why it's the focus of your company? It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, a beautiful mushroom there.
Well, it's probably the most iconic mushroom. You know, when you look at anyone talking about the psychedelic space, they use that mushroom as sort of the image, even though it's not actually a psilocybin mushroom. It's Amanita muscaria or flyagaric, as you mentioned, and the active compound is muscimol, not psilocybin. But it's really unique because popular culture has done a great job introducing it. You know, it's the mushroom from Super Mario Brothers, Alice in Wonderland, the emoji on your phone. So everyone recognizes it, but they don't actually know, what the compounds are. And then if you do a quick little research of it, it comes up and suggests that it's poisonous. And because of that reason, most people have just ignored it. When we put the company together, it was important for us to identify. First, we thought, let's put a strong team together because we saw a lot of similarities in psychedelics as we saw 10, 12 years ago in the cannabis space. And a lot of the guys that were founders putting this together and approached me to run it had done quite well in various aspects of the cannabis bull market. And so we said, let's put together a team that has sort of all the legs of the stool touching the ground. So we've got science, we've got CPG, we've got, government relations. And I can talk to you about the team and filling in those spots. But then after we had done that, then we identified which compound to work with. And my COO, David Shizzle, who's based in Tel Aviv, identified Amanita muscaria. We did the work, we did a toxicology assessment with KGK Sciences, which is our contract research org. And we determined that, in fact, it's not poisonous. And if you do an extraction and you work with it properly, this is actually, a safe compound that's been used for centuries by, the Siberian shamans and various indigenous groups. So we felt quite confident that we could do it. But to your point, Thomas, the great thing is we're the only ones right now doing it. So as all the public companies, no one else is touching this mushroom. I believe there are a few private ones in the wings waiting for us to complete our preclinicals, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little later on. And then they'll sort of try to jump into it. But we're excited to have the lone voice for this right now and be on the stage with it.
Exciting. Now, just in terms of why it's flown under the radar and why it's and it hasn't been classified as a controlled substance. Maybe I can understand just a little more of the belly of that.
Yeah, I think there's multiple factors for that. The first one being, if you have that sort of, if it's known as a poisonous mushroom, people are just going to stay away from it, right? So, for that reason alone, it was mislabeled. Now, in the genus of Amanita mushrooms, there are some of the most poisonous mushrooms in the world. So, Amanita muscaria is not one of those. It does, and I know we're going to talk about the various compounds, but one of them can make you sick. And so you have to do an extraction process. You have to work with the mushroom versus some of the other ones where you can just pick them and eat them. And I think that's by and large why it was never used as a recreational drug or used for the qualities that way. There's a large community that exists, and we're engaging with that community online that use it in sort of the cottage industry. They pick them, they make tinctures and teas and work with them. But we're the first company to do the science and get it to a point they can actually take this product and have it safe for human consumption available on the shelves.
Fantastic. And in terms of those active ingredients, maybe we could talk a bit about what's driving this particular mushroom.
Yeah, for sure. So the three main ingredients are ibotenic acid, muscimol, and muscarine. Muscimol is the compound that we're after that provides the desired effect. Okay. In our first products that we'll be moving towards will be a health and wellness product that's going to provide a calming and a relaxing effect for you. So similar to what you might experience with, say, melatonin. Our proprietary extract that we've come up with over weeks of trial and error and working with this was able to convert ibotenic acid into muscimol. So when you do this extraction process, you convert ibotenic acid into muscimol, which is very important because ibotenic acid is the compound that can provide, cause that sort of really ill feeling. And in some cases, you could end up going to the hospital because, you get quite sick if you take a lot of it. With respects to deaths, I think there's been one case of someone passing away from a massive amount of consumption. and not getting to a hospital on time, and that was years ago. There's no note of that in modern day. And again, when you do the process of extraction, you get it to that point, and you do the preclinicals that we're doing, you identify those safe levels and you put all the labeling on the bottle. So we're very confident that we've got, the right recipe here.
And so that would that be in like health food stores, that kind of thing, like, or where would consumers find that?
That's a great question. So we're really excited. So, we should be completing our preclinical trials the end of this year. And then we'll be looking to start marketing products in the first half of 2022. So this will be the first time ever that an Amanita muscaria derived product will be available, for sale in North America as safe for human consumption. It's sold right now with the sort of disclaimer, not for human consumption. People will use it and make teas and do what they will. But this will be the first time doing that. And it's really important for us to sort of get it to the position and go through those scientific trials, because that's the foundation off which the next phase of our company becomes. So right now we're health and wellness focused and getting products into the market. And the path we're going is an NDI, so new dietary ingredient with the FDA, and an NHPN with Health Canada. So once we get our trials completed, we make the application. That allows us then to pivot. And so, we've got Professor David Nutt on our board, and I'm sure yourselves and a lot of your viewers will recognize his name from Compass Pathways, Imperial College. He's one of the top 5 guys in the space as far as the modern Renaissance. And he's been a delight to work with. He wrote a paper on Amanita muscaria and muscimol about 30 years ago. So when we cold called him and said, "Hey, we're doing this," he was like, "You guys are crazy. This is great." And so his whole thing is he's excited about doing human trials. So we announced recently that we're going to do some sleep studies, which will be our first trials on humans. And that was waiting on the completion of our 90-day toxicity study so that we have those safe dosage ranges. So we're getting to that. We should have that. The study should be completed this week. Then we'll wait for the report. So hopefully we'll have that report in the next two weeks or so. And that's what I'm pushing for. But you push. Sometimes you push a rope. So we're really excited. We're having a call with Professor Nutt and the 3 individuals that he's identified to run the study. We have a call with them next week and really start getting that going. So, we're moving towards productization, but at the same time, that next phase, as I mentioned, for us is to say, okay, now we're able to take this very exciting compound being muscimol in our extract, AME-1, which is our proprietary extract, and use all the work that we've done now as the foundation, and then move into doing, clinical trials and moving in towards, looking at what type of indications this can benefit. And that's where Professor Nutt's most interested. And we're excited to have him there to lead that development for us.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, so you got this AME-1, which is currently in preclinical trials. And if I were to understand that, what do those trials look like, and what exactly are you trying to identify? Maybe I can understand that process a bit better, and then I have a couple follow-up questions after that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So obviously, as I've said, it's the foundational trials, right? So to date, no one has done the scientific work on Amanita, on muscimol. And so what we've done is we've designed with KGK the preclinical trial that positions us to make that application to the FDA and Health Canada. So it's a 14-day oral toxicity, a 90-day oral toxicity, stabilities, neurobehavioral studies. We're actually looking at some new ones as well that we'll be announcing shortly to complement that. So it's really that foundational work so that you can take the data and say, okay, this is safe for human consumption and it's safe in these environments under these dosages.
Got it. That's really helpful. And right now, so in terms of the regulatory approval process, maybe you can help me understand that. Obviously, you guys are going for Canada and the US, like maybe just understanding that just how those tracks differ, obviously as a product, a healthcare product, but then further to that, like just so I can understand.
And timeline too on that would be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So when you look at there's a lot of similarities between Canada and the US, and there's also some very big differences. So a lot of what we're doing applies to that application for both countries. The US is actually a little bit quicker because you're doing that new NDI, a new dietary ingredient. So it's a food supplement. We basically make our application, and then they have a certain amount of time. I believe it's 45 days to come back to us with, challenging it. But it really is sort of, the way it's been designed. We've dotted I's, crossed T's, so we feel very confident. Whereas in Canada, it's more like a 90-day process, the review process, and a little longer. So our goal is to be selling in the US first, and then getting our HPN in Canada.
So as far as once you get to that point, there's obviously like a distribution strategy that goes into it. Is there anything you could share on how you'd like to do that once you get to that point?
Yeah, for sure. I was hoping to have a release out this morning in time for this, but so we're working towards that. We've got a new hire that we'll be announcing is coming on, just a complete rock star when it comes to launching new products in a similar category. We've worked with him for the last couple of months, and he'll be coming on full time with us and really taking the lead on that, which is dynamite, right? And that was one of the things keeping me up at night. I had all the science, I had the team supporting us, working with KGK. We had that whole path, and that was, how do we take it now to monetize it and build the brand and build the revenues to support the next phase for the company. This week we'll see some announcements towards that, and then some additional announcements, I think, towards sort of the path to market and what that looks like. So a lot of exciting things happen. We're working with our ad agency, DAX Marketing, who's helping us with our rebrand. So we're going to have a new website, an e-commerce play. You'll start seeing merch like this for sale. People wanted it. For the last year we've had it, but
yeah.
We didn't want to be known. We didn't want people to think, oh, they're an R&D company, but they're selling hats and T-shirts, right? So, but now that we're getting close to building that e-commerce and having a product in the market, it made sense to have this. We've trademarked Got Shrooms. We've done all the right things to have that as a property for the company.
Yeah.
We're in Miami for that conference and walking around with this shirt. Everybody wanted one. It's kind of cool. So it's just another opportunity for us. But we wanted to wait till the timing was right so that people recognized and respected the company for the science, rather than just thinking they're taking advantage of a boom in a cycle and trying to just sort of ride the wave. We're building a company.
And right now, and I guess the opportunity really is if you had to address what this mushroom can address in terms of people looking to take it, what would be like the key conditions and that you're targeting? And obviously there's a marketing strategy around making sure the supplement gets to those people.
Yeah, so I'm gonna do the anecdotally, people have used this for
right.
captions.
Yeah.
So the good thing for us is there is a tremendous amount of people who have used the product, and because of the internet and these communities that exist where they share ideas, we're able to see a lot of the indications that they're using this for. Yeah. Our first product is a health and wellness. Again, it's going to be a food supplement, a microdose to give you that calming, relaxing effect. But people are using it. They're making teas, they're making tinctures. We're working with the National Research Council of Canada on how it affects the inflammation in your gut, on how it works as a topical. And so, there's a lot of opportunities and people are using it for that. So whether it be for pain, for nerve ending pain, whether it be for inflammation, and then there's people using it for various, like for insomnia, they have trouble sleeping. This is it is called, the dreamer. So, this is one of those drugs, one of these compounds, if you were to take a larger dose of it, the effect that you would have is similar to being inebriated. And then you get very tired and you go into a very deep sleep. And oftentimes you're going to have these very vivid dreams where, you're going to experience this. So, we don't recommend it in a macrodose form whatsoever. We're looking at this as how it can be beneficial to people and provide that calming, relaxing effect.
That's great. It's super exciting time for you guys. You guys clearly a pathway to getting this to market, and that's exciting. So in terms of investors, what are the key catalysts we should look for looking out 6-12 months?
Yeah, so I would say, this week, look for some announcements, sort of beefing up our team, showing you what that looks like. We'll have that rebrand, announcing the completion of the preclinicals, working towards getting those products in the market, I think is a huge milestone for us. When we look at the sector, we don't think of ourselves as competitors. We're all peers. We're all trying to do the good work here and help that. And everybody's trying to sort of disrupt big pharma in the sense of there's opportunities here with other compounds that can be beneficial. What we like about the strategy we have is we feel that we've de-risked it for our investors in the sense you've got your health and wellness play. You have the ability to start generating revenue, building the brand while supporting, the next phase, which is clinical, and it goes into 5 and 6 years and multi-millions of dollars. And those are, to some effect, there's quite binary as you get into those higher stages. And there's a lot of risk attached to that. So we felt it was important to create, if we could, and with this compound, fortunately we could because it was never considered a scheduled drug. We felt it was important to go this path. It took a little longer. And I think the street doesn't recognize the clinical potential of us as well, because we had to go this route first and do the NDI. But once we do that, we've now de-risked for our shareholders. It's our belief anyways, that by generating revenue, building a brand and having that side of the business, as you build out the other one, you've got some stability. It's not all or nothing. And that's sort of a key thing for us, is making sure that our investors, doing provisional patents around our processes and stuff, just to protect the capital that we've raised and our investors' money.
Jeff, thank you so much for a great
This is
overview.
great.
And look forward to having you back on to talk about all these catalysts that are coming up. And that's Psyched Wellness. Jeff Stevens, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone, quick break, and then we're coming back with a company you may know from the cannabis sector, Goodness Growth. All right, everyone. Welcome back to Grizzle Psychedelics Con. If you're watching on social, remember, hit the like, hit the retweet, let them know we're out here. We still got a lot of big CEOs to talk to. So you don't give up on us yet. We're here.
Keep going.
Yeah.
It's Grizzle Psychedelics Con. We're bringing the heat. We've been doing it since 11 in the morning. Keeps going.
Yeah, we gotta keep going. So our next guest, you're going to hear from the Chief Medical Officer of Goodness Growth. All right, I'm joined today by Dr. Stephen Dahmer. He's Chief Medical Officer of Goodness Growth. You might have heard of Goodness Growth in Cannabis Con and in Psychedelics Con. They're a unique beast. They've been in cannabis, but they have a very medical focus. And so they've gotten into psychedelics in the last year. And so we're excited to hear kind of what they've been working on since the last time we talked with the company. So Stephen, thanks for being here.
Such a pleasure to be here. And you guys have been up since 11 a.m. It's a long day.
Tough life.
Yeah. Oh man, we going. Yeah, dude, it's always great to have Vireo, now Goodness Growth. You guys have a very medical focus, which was always unique in the cannabis side, and it's great that you guys have bridged into psychedelics.
Yeah. So I just want to start things off because I think people, they hear from Kyle, the CEO of Goodness Growth, quite a bit, but hear from you less. Could you tell us a bit about how long you've been with the company, and have you always been in a similar role, or have you kind of moved around?
Yeah, so I've been over 6 years with Vireo Health, and I think you guys know well that in kind of startup mode, things evolve quickly. I wasn't afraid of changing toilet seats and counting cash in the early days. And certainly things have evolved to a point where, we are supporting 2 large-scale clinical trials. We have a lot of research projects in addition to, we get labeled a little bit medical. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but for me, wellness is tremendously medical. And I think we're also the experts in that space as well.
So yeah, maybe it sounds like you kind of have narrowed down how you're going to attack this market. Could you talk us through, what's the strategy on psychedelics for Goodness Growth?
Yeah, I would not say that we've narrowed down how we're going to attack this. I think it's a constantly evolving market that is changing overnight, as we all see. And so we knew that we have a fascination with plants and started out the gate with cannabis. And since the early years, speaking with Dr. Kingsley, we've always thought beyond cannabis. It is our bread and butter, and still to this day serves us incredibly well. And we have many kind of buns in the oven that I think will even bear more fruit related to clinical trials, related to medical expertise. But we were always looking beyond that. And as we watched psychedelics evolve, we knew that our expertise, everything that we had learned from cannabis, would serve us well in this environment. But one of the first things we did, rather than rush in and put up a flag, was to, and I think we'll talk a little bit about our first research pilot, and that's let's ask some open-ended questions. Let's find out what's going on here. And some might argue, wow, that's moving pretty slow. But for us, asking those big picture questions and really hearing from the people that are doing this real time informed our process and informed our next step. And, I'm happy to say too, that you probably have seen our press release on utilization of virtual reality. And it was that research, that kind of supported that path, along with our Chief Science Officer, Eric Greenbaum.
I mean, you guys kind of have the luxury of being able to go slow because you have Goodness Growth, this whole cannabis business supporting everything. So that lets you kind of be very targeted and say, we're not going to rush into something because we need revenue today, right?
Yeah, and I've been preaching this lecture about plant medicine for over 2 decades as a physician, and these will evolve and these will change. But we're in for kind of the long haul, right? Really mission-driven company. How is this at the end of the story here? How is this helping the people in front of us? And we're up to over 100,000 unique patients that we've served at Goodness Growth, and I think on a daily basis about every single one of them. And we think the same about psychedelics and entheogens. What's the end game here on how this can truly benefit the people that will be utilizing this in the future?
So I saw that you conducted a survey in September that was looking at the mental effects of ingesting natural psychedelics. Hopefully I'm describing the survey right. How are the results of this survey, if any, impacting your scientific research at this stage?
So that's still ongoing. We're really looking closely at the data. There's rich interpretation of a lot of amazing feedback. And these are, again, people maybe like you and I, participating in a naturalistic setting, usually mainly going to a retreat somewhere, ingesting an entheogenic substance in the last 5 years and sharing. And it's been amazing, kind of the feedback that we get and how willing those that participate in this are to give that feedback. And it's been incredibly informative, even though we haven't even published a paper yet, which we're working on, but informative in directing kind of which areas to go, where interest lies. And even one of our questions is there a potential openness to utilization of virtual reality in entheogenic retreats and entheogenic interventions? Absolutely. And we will publish more on that as it comes. But, again, asking the question, is this a viable path, for these substances?
So is it accurate to say your interest more lies with the natural psychedelics at this stage than the pharmaceutical side of things?
Yeah, I think that's hits the nail on the head in terms of one of the best questions that arise. And again, even in my own personal experience as an integrative physician, I think that there is untapped potential to these plant substances. Look at ayahuasca. These are two different plants that it's remarkable that in some way it was discovered a long time ago. Mixing these two together is what results in the hallucinogenic experience. So there's a lot of untapped knowledge in these plants, and not to mention a wide array of constituents in our medical model, which I'm a huge fan of, and the FDA process, and I write scripts on a daily basis as a physician. But the dogma has been to distill these plants to a single substance. And we're starting to see with cannabis more and more research supporting the idea of what we call an entourage or an ensemble. These plants, when coming together in their natural package, are going to have a softer, potentially more meaningful impact on human physiology. And I have absolutely nothing that would refute why that wouldn't be true with entheogens as well. And I think that we rush towards the single molecule. That's what we understand. There's certainly ways to commoditize that, but we're missing out on a big picture and a movement, which we've seen in cannabis, that it's nuanced. We need multiple products with multiple chemovars and chemotypes for the multitude of people that will be utilizing this that wanted a personalized approach. We'll see the same with psychedelics in the future. Even though there will be an FDA winner, or maybe more than one, it will go beyond that because of a right to consciousness impacting plants.
Now, I know you guys have been a leader on the technology side for medical cannabis. So I'm wondering, it could be too early. It sounds like you're casting a wide net. Are you planning to take a technology first approach, delivery equipment like terp safe for psychedelics, for example, or is the pharmaceutical angle going to take up more of your time?
Yeah, I'll be really frank in that, being a Schedule I plant touching business, to go the route, of additional, Schedule I licensing is nearly impossible. And so technology, and again, Resurgent, which is a non-plant touching entity, to be able to utilize our knowledge, our expertise, even the data that's available to us, to intervene in ways where we can sell a pickaxe rather than getting our hands dirty and the tremendous headache that can be twisted into a Schedule I substance, which we've seen firsthand.
And that really is the different. Like you guys are the opportunity to be an auxiliary play in this industry, to like the virtual reality. Just understanding that it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's our first play, and it clearly makes the most sense. There's not a ton of capital that's going to be required. We still get to utilize the expertise again that we bring to the table. If this is successful, who wouldn't utilize VR? And one of the things that you look at is
this is psychotherapy in the metaverse, right? You're a metaverse play.
Again, I think we're going right away to disease. And I think we skip over this idea. And if we look at our research, these are preliminary findings, the vast majority of those participating are not doing this to treat a disease. There will be that side effect where they may see improvement in sleep, chronic pain, addiction, fill in the blank, but they're coming this from a wellness perspective. And I think we're seeing the same thing that's happening in cannabis. And, FDA does not have a big role in wellness, and that's where the freedom is allowed. And so if you can create a positive relationship, empower a more positive relationship between people and plants in a wellness sphere, wow, that's where the true opportunity lies.
Interesting. So it sounds like you have a lot of irons in the fire to help investors just as they think of what's going to be coming out from Goodness Growth in the future. Can you give us your feel on when new information will come out, or any studies you have in the works? Like, what should we look for in the next, say, year or so?
Yeah, I would just kind of reiterate that first and foremost, we're an incredibly experienced, trusted cannabis company. That's our bread and butter and what we've been doing since day zero. We are incredibly knowledgeable, experienced, and well-versed in Schedule I plant substances. And so we will look at lower hanging fruit, which includes the application of VR, which Eric Greenbaum filed a patent on behalf of Resurgent. And we will be exploring that to see what possibilities exist. And we will continue to update. We'll be publishing the results of this findings likely shortly, hopefully in the next 3 to 6 months. Additional steps along the VR pathway, we will continue to share as we move forward. And again, we're surveying the land. We're making good connections. We're setting up possibilities for the future. And again, non-plant touching.
So is the conclusion here that this isn't a change in Goodness Growth's business model? This is like kind of a free option where some exciting things could come from this, but you're not rushing into pushing capital and trying to do something different versus what's working in cannabis for you at the moment.
Absolutely. The one thing I would say is that, free sounds cheap, Scott, which, again, sometimes it can be. But I think with small amounts of capital, you can make a huge difference if you know which direction to go. And that's what we've learned on a 7-year path with cannabis. And we're watching closely as things evolve and where can we insert that expertise in ways that make sense, that can help people, and obviously we'll have an ROI.
That's very exciting. Dr. Dahmer, thank you. It's always interesting to hear the medical angle, and especially as you guys are taking a unique non-plant touching approach. Thank you for illuminating the pathway for Goodness Growth in this unique arena. Thank you. And for everyone watching Psychedelics Con, we've got our main event. We keep going. We got Compass Pathways to close the conference. George Goldsmith, stay tuned. That's coming at 1:20. Stephen, thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been 20 years that we've been screaming about plants, and it's nice that we're getting some excitement around it.
I know, man. Times are changing. It was slow to start, but hopefully it's picking up.
Thank you.
All
right.
All right, welcome back, Grizzle Psychedelics Con. We've been running since 11 a.m. and we're ending it off on a high note with
bang.
None other than Compass Pathways. Guys, if you've enjoyed every minute of this, and I know you have, hit the thumbs up, the retweet. You know what to do. We got Compass Pathways next. All right, it's a very a pleasure indeed to have George Goldsmith from Compass Pathways, CEO of Compass Pathways. Thank you for joining Grizzle Psychedelics Con, the largest psychedelics conference in the world.
Hey, Thomas, thanks so much. And hi, Scott.
Thank you very much. George, obviously a very interesting time for Compass Pathways. We're going to get more into the details, but first, for those who don't know, could you give us the backstory of the company and how it began and the company's mission?
Yeah, for sure. Look, we started this the way far too many people struggle with mental health. So our son really struggled deeply with mental health issues. We went off to university. We kept looking for help. Medicines didn't seem to work. And then the more we did research, the more we realized that everyone has a story. We weren't alone in this. It was just such a difficult thing with medicine side effects of the medicines put on top of the medicines, which already had side effects. It was pretty grim. And we kept, my co-founder, my wife, Ekaterina Malevskaya, doctor, internist, just spent her sleepless nights looking for ways to help, and finally came upon psilocybin in February of 2013. She asked me if I knew anything about it because I grew up in the 60s and 70s. I said, yep, I did. Actually knew quite a bit about it back then. And at that time, I decided to let's learn more. Nothing was working right now. So we went and looked more and more into the research, became major donors to psychedelic research. Yet the more we saw the research, the more we realized there was no path to patients. And we needed to really look at how do we create a robust global regulatory path to get this, like any other medicine, into the hands of the millions and millions of patients who needed it. And that was the beginning of Compass. Our mission is really straightforward. It's to accelerate patient access to evidence-based innovation in mental health to help people live happier and healthier lives. And evidence-based is super important, particularly in this space where there are tons of claims being made by lots of organizations, but they're just not doing the hard work that's needed. And I think this is where we really differentiate ourselves.
You guys are at the leading edge of evidence-based, right? And so the understanding of just the history, that's very helpful. And you're with your son and psilocybin. Now, could you, as you guys started to look at psychedelics more closely, could you just provide a bit of a history, the treatment history of mental illness with psychedelics?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so LSD invented in 1943, actually before that, but really kind of discovered as a possible tool. Started to do clinical trials with that, but in the old-fashioned clinical trials, not the way we do them today. It was really psychiatrists giving them to patients and writing up a case history. So no randomized control, that kind of standard wasn't even in people's minds at that point. Next, psilocybin synthesized for the first time from magic mushrooms in 1958. Trial started 59-60. And until about 66, when these medicines were essentially made illegal, that path was starting in 1971. They were all made illegal to study, largely because of them getting out of hand in the 60s and that not really playing well with the Vietnam War, et cetera. So lots of research kind of before 1971, about 40,000 people participated in these kind of one-off clinical trials in LSD and psilocybin. Then the dark ages happened, right? No one wanted to risk their career. No one wanted to do anything to be close to this because they were illegal, vilified substances. Until about 1994, when DMT was looked at for the first time with an FDA approval for a trial. The FDA has to approve trials long before they have to approve drugs. So that was the first step. Then a great work that happened with Hopkins and NYU and UCLA, doing that and kind of up until about 2016. But all these were really small trials. And what we wanted to do was to really look at what do we need to do to play by the rules everywhere so that we can address this global issue, which is a huge pressing issue just focused on depression. About 325 million people suffer with depression. About a third of them aren't helped by current medicines. So it's a huge problem. And we really wanted to address that problem at scale, Thomas and Scott. So that's why we did what we're doing. It's why we're kind of super serious about it, because the people between us and patients are very serious about public health. They need to see evidence. And we're doing that in 10 countries right now. Our phase 2 study just came out, 10 countries, 7 languages, 22 sites, unprecedented. The largest randomized controlled trial ever done, the gold standard. And I'll just end by saying all the prior studies, all of the prior randomized controlled studies since 1958 total to about 150 people in total.
Wow.
Our last trial was 200.
That puts it in perspective.
So, the word groundbreaking really is really apropos here, because this is something that's just never been done on this scale before, your phase 2B.
Yeah, it is groundbreaking for this space, but it's every day at work for other medicines that are in development, right? And so,
right.
I think we have to put this in context. We're very, very proud and excited about what we've achieved. It has never been achieved, to your point. It is groundbreaking. But on the other hand, this is just the work you need to do. And so we've done those trials across Europe, UK, and also US and Canada. So we have this really broad base, and all told, just the people suffering with treatment-resistant depression that we can help in that area is about 8 million people, who are about 25% of the whole number of patients in the US and Europe who suffer with this. We've just demonstrated in our phase 2 trial that at 12 weeks after a single dose, with therapy support, by the way, very important.
Yeah.
In a controlled setting, don't do this at home. And what we did is we demonstrated that 25% of the patients who are these are not just run-of-the-mill depressed patients. These are people who suffer. Often they can't find work. I mean, it's just very, very difficult for them. And 25% of them, after a single therapy session with COMP360 or psilocybin, what happened? They're in remission.
It really is incredible. And George, could we just talk about the treatment of COMP360 for those who don't know, just what it entails, and I think that's a good segue to understanding what was the study itself. But maybe we could start with just the basis of what COMP360 is.
Yeah, for sure.
Overall, and then get into the study and how, if you don't mind, I want to unpack this, because there's a lot of people who've seen the results of that, but I just wanted to take it step by step and help everyone understand what has happened. And
okay, first I'm going to do Regulation 101 just for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So regulation is created so that people don't make claims that can't be backed up with data. Why is that important? People with depression and other people are hopeless. So if you give them hope but you don't have evidence, that's just unethical. That's wrong. That's why regulation exists. 3 things in regulation: the quality. So is the medicine you're creating, by the way, we have a synthetic patented form of psilocybin. We have 9 patents, 4 in the US. And that form of psilocybin, called a polymorph, is a synthetic form. So no mushrooms are harmed in our work, to be very clear. It's a synthetic medicine, okay? And so we're looking at the quality of that, the safety of it. So is this something that you can give to people and the side effects aren't too bad? They have enough. The side effects, when you look at the benefit it creates, kind of are less than the benefits, right? It's a risk benefit. And then lastly, it's about the efficacy. Does this work for those patients? And so if you're going to make a promise that COMP360 therapy can help patients with treatment-resistant depression, you better have the data. And so that's what we started. It's broken into 3 phases, phase 1, 2, 3. We've just completed phase 2. This is often called the valley of death for medicines, but we survived and really thrived coming out of it. So we're now getting ready for that last phase. Let me tell you a little bit about what we did, because I know some of these concepts are a little geeky. So first, when you do a trial, it's randomized, meaning you have people and you test different things, and people are randomly assigned so that you know that it isn't going to be because you assign the most depressed to one condition or another. You assign all 3. What were we comparing? We were comparing a high, medium, and low dose of psilocybin, specifically a high dose with a low dose, and then a medium dose, a 10 milligram dose with a low dose. What did we find? Well, what we did is we took patients, they had to go through lots of screening, we had to make sure they were depressed. It wasn't raising your hand and saying, hey, I want to do this. Doctors had to refer them, medical records had to be checked. We had to make sure that the patients were seeking to address. That's what the regulators need. So what we did is we did that. Interestingly enough, other studies typically had 50-60% of people with prior psychedelic experience. We had 6%. Why is that important? Because that's what the real world has of people with prior psychedelic experience. So we need to demonstrate that this thing works in the real world. It's not just for the 6% of psychedelic enthusiasts.
It's not just hippies who are depressed, you know, right?
Yeah, well, I think it may even be the opposite, but you know, we do have a large group of people who are suffering who haven't had these medicines before.
That's right.
We demonstrated that we could, even in that group, after 12 weeks, right, we showed an immediate response, immediate the day after. We never see that with a single dose in other drugs. Then a sustained to 3 weeks. That was what we said we would do. We had the 25 milligram beat the 1 milligram, which is the test we provided, by 6.6 points on a scale. Now, why does that matter? Well, 2 points on that scale can mean a difference for a patient. We had 6.6% after a single dose with therapy. So people go into a room, they're supported by a therapist, they've done good preparation, they then have music, eye shades, therapists there. They have experience at the end of it, the day after they're tested, and this is what happens. So, you know, I think this is really important to kind of demonstrate the rigor. We did this in 7 languages, 10 countries, you know, all different. You know, this is amazing in terms of the amount of regulation that we had to go through. And, you know, the breakthrough therapy designation that I know we have for treatment-resistant depression has been a huge help, because that gives us a pass to talk to regulators more and more often. And the more you engage with the regulators, the more you understand what they need to see, and therefore you can do it. You can't play a guessing game.
Just on that breakthrough regulation, just so
our
audience understands how important and why was it granted? Why
would you ask for it? So interactions, no one need to bring back bad memories for your audience, but this whole process is like writing the largest term paper you could ever imagine, right? So what we did is we applied to the FDA with all of the reasons that we thought psilocybin therapy, the way we were developing it, was a breakthrough for these patients. And so what you had to do is to say, look, there's another medicine you've approved, but the safety issues are kind of intense. And we think we have a better safety profile. And we think this is going to work. And here's some data from London Imperial that says we're not just sort of dreaming this up. And this is really important when you compare us to other companies. It's really follow the data, follow the regulatory steps, right? It's easy to do press releases. It's harder to do science. And so I think when you really look at this, you have to look at the rigor that gets brought into every step and how far ahead we've gone. So I think that's really important for people.
Now, so the 25 milligrams, so just with respect to this phase 2B, the 25 milligram has been proven very efficacious. Could you just talk through just some of the outcomes from the data? I know there was a small group that had suicidal ideations, but just again, as you mentioned earlier, Ron, this is a group that no other therapy has worked in the past. I think just framing, understanding this data set and the importance of the efficacy of it working, and just in the context of all outcomes?
So first of all, what's unique about this is it was a single dose in a supported therapy. No other people were off all of their other medications.
That's so big.
Yeah.
Like that. That's
they were
huge.
off all of their. We worked with them to get them off because the view is that psilocybin can actually interact with those medicines. So we tapered them off, and that was a little bit more difficult for some, but really it wasn't a big problem for people given the support that they were provided. Took 3 weeks, typically, sometimes a little longer. Then they had the psilocybin session in a clinic. It kind of looks more like a living room, good music system, quiet. And people are given that dose. 25 milligrams is a very significant dose. If Terence McKenna were here, he'd call it a heroic dose. This is a very big dose, and don't try this at home, everyone. This requires support. It can bring up issues. Now, people with treatment-resistant depression often have, sadly, suicidal ideation. They think about it because it's kind of a hopeless place to be. In our trial, they've tried 2 to 4 medicines. They haven't worked, sometimes more. So patients with depression often just are hopeless, and with treatment-resistant depression, even the more so. So in our trial, when we had this single dose, that at 1 day after, we saw a huge dip in the scores from the 25 milligram. The others had a slight dip, which is what you expect after you provide attention and care to people. There is a placebo effect, and we saw that. That was good news. If we didn't see that, then we'd wonder. But that was very waning. And what we saw was this immediate decline, and at 3 weeks, for about 30, almost 37% of patients, they actually had a response. What does that mean? They were half as depressed as they were before on the scale that we use. And some were in remission. And that remission continued for many. And at 12 weeks, again, all we had was the preparation, a couple sessions, the dosing and therapy, and a couple follow-up sessions. 12 weeks later, 25% weren't on any other medications and were in remission. This is extraordinary.
That is extraordinary.
Yeah.
The other thing we have to be aware of is that 74% weren't, right? And that means this isn't a placebo, it isn't a panacea. It doesn't work for everybody. And when we talk to payers and insurance companies and health systems over here like the NHS, people really care about knowing who works for and who it doesn't, because you don't want to raise false hope, and you also don't want to be paying for things might not work. The big thing that we have is the largest data set ever created in this area. What we have are all the traditional measures. And by the way, the people rating this, they called the patient by phone. They interviewed them. They didn't have any clue what study they were in, what they took, and we still saw these kinds of results in 7 languages, 10 countries. So we know that we have a model that works. That's important. We know we have a medicine that works for some. We need to understand who it works for and how to make that work better for more. And we have the data to do that. So we're really excited. And the safety issues, yes, there are safety issues. There are always safety issues with these things. They tend to be short-lived. We'll be giving a more full report. We just report the top line results. But right now, what we do know is that the most serious events, the suicidal behavior where someone thinks about actually committing it, they don't do it. There were no suicide attempts, to be very clear. But those people didn't respond to the medicine. They were part of the group that had a 25 milligram, but it didn't work for them. So this is kind of what we need to learn. Sorry, I'm so long-winded, but
that was very helpful.
It provides a lot of great context. Now, one thing I know, everyone is not that far away removed from somebody who suffered depression. I know my mom suffered depression. Everyone who's taken pharmaceutical, whatever compound, whatever drug, the outcomes are never optimal. And I would just think right now, this is being looked through the lens for treatment-resistant depression. But at what point do we, the patient, say, listen, I don't want to be on a regime that requires a pill per day. How do I, when does it move to everyone who's suffering depression?
Well, first of all, we don't have evidence yet that that's going to make sense. So we're looking at that. I think we'll see some data. But again, I think what we've chosen to do at Compass across the board, we've announced we're going into PTSD as well with Comp 360. What's really important to us is that we work with the people who are suffering most. And the people who are suffering most also create not only the largest burden for them and their families, but also for health systems. So what's really important to us is these people typically don't have the $5,000 for whatever to go off and get this. These folks often need insurance, et cetera. So our whole focus is on what is the easiest way to make sure that this is a reimbursed treatment. If it's not reimbursed and people don't have access to it, like your mom, well, I don't know about your mom probably can afford it, but but people who can afford it, right? This is what's so important. And you have to start, if you have most people, okay, to be really clear, most people, the first or second SSRI work for them. And that's about 70%, but there is that huge 30%, almost a third, it doesn't work. That's where we're focused. And, if you have medicine that's far less expensive, and it can be helpful to people, you should do their resources. I mean, look how much healthcare costs, right? So I think this will always be a little bit later unless, and this is the really interesting thing, can you identify the patients who aren't going to respond before they start treatment? And that's really a big data game. We have those kind of data. That's a lot of work. We need more data like that, working with health systems, which we are, to understand this life course of what is someone who becomes so-called treatment resistant. Last thing, people are not resisting treatment. These people want to get better. The depression is resistant to the medicines they've been given. I really want to make that clear, right? This is not blame the patient. The patients are doing their best. They're trying their hardest. And it's,
So George, we finished phase 2, clear data that shows efficacy. Now we move to phase 3. Could you just walk us through how investors should look at this and what are the milestones going forward?
Yeah, so for sure. So phase 2 goes to phase 3 with a big meeting at the FDA and on other regulatory meetings. And you basically say, here's everything we know about the drug. This is our phase 2 study, but we also did the largest phase 1 study ever done with healthy volunteers. By the way, we know how to execute really well. So that was 19 months from a blank sheet of paper, no protocol, to data, unheard of. So that's you got to execute quickly and well. So we did that. We take those data, we take the phase 2 data, we take a bunch of other studies that we've been doing, animal studies and so forth, that are all required to then say, okay, you guys can go to the next bigger study because that's going to involve more patients. We'll make sure it's safe. So we make sure it's safe. We demonstrate that. That's a big meeting at the FDA. We share what we're going to do in phase 3, and then we move forward. Our plans are to be moving forward with that behind us, that big meeting at the FDA, in the 3rd quarter next year. So that's our expectation, but things can change. To be very clear, the FDA has to approve this. It isn't just all in our command, our control. But I think with breakthrough therapy designation, the huge unmet need, and the rigor that we bring to things, which is really, that's the big message to take away from this.
Thank you, George.
Doing this work.
And one final question. So Comp 360 is addressing treatment-resistant depression. That's what these clinical trials are doing. What opportunities are there in Compass Pathways pipeline to address other mental illness?
So first, we've just announced a PTSD program that we're undertaking as sponsored research, moving into a early phase 2 study. And more will be about that, but that's something we've announced already. We have academic partnerships, which are super important. Again, that's where you get these early signals. If we see an early signal, then we go deep. And so where we go looking at early signals now are anorexia, body dysmorphic disorder, bipolar 2. Think of our kind of true north for us at Compass is looking at where there's huge unmet need that we can make a difference in. So that's what we're doing with Comp 360. Now, I want to also make sure that everyone understands We have a discovery center that we're working on. Hamilton Morris, Jason Wallach, the two leading psychedelic chemists are working there in Philadelphia, where I think you are today, University of Sciences with the University of San Diego and Medical College of Wisconsin. We also have another lab working in kind of the heart of this at Basel, Switzerland, developing new medicines. And our goal is always to be developing the medicine and looking at innovation and how we can bring that forward, perhaps shorten things a little bit, but not to 5 minutes. There's no evidence that that works.
Yeah.
People need to process the experience a bit. So we're looking at those things. We have a lot of those different medicines in drugs, early stage research. But we expect to see some of those in the clinic within 18 months. And that'll be the next generations with the rigor and focus that we bring to things. Last thing I should mention is we're big into technology and how do we advance therapy. The big thing that investors need to think about is that in many ways, psychiatry is where oncology was 30 years ago. We're just getting to a place where we can do personalized, so we know who responds, who doesn't. We can do predictive, so we know will people actually benefit from this and are they relapsing? And we can prevent that relapse. And we do that through a technology that our team is really working on. And it's been really exciting. So this whole idea of bringing clinical care excellence together with technology, together with breakthrough medicines, all in a clinical research, and then work with payers to make it accessible. That's who we are. That's how we spend our time. And it's been really good talking so far.
Hey, George, thank you so much. Compass Pathways, the leader in the psychedelics revolution. George Goldsmith, thank you so much for being part of Grizzle Psychedelics Con 2021.
Thank you, George.
Thank you so much. Take care. Be well.
All right, Tom, can you believe it? We've made it to the end.
We've done it, guys. Thank you very much for those who tuned in for a insightful day of just understanding the psychedelic sector. We've had the leaders of the industry join us. We are doing it again tomorrow, but with the cannabis sector. Can't emphasize enough how big of a day tomorrow is going to be. It's just as big as today was.
Yeah, all the leaders as usual. I do want to say, if you guys know any growth investors who aren't aware of the cannabis industry, the psychedelics industry, there's probably no better way for them to get up to speed but listening to these industry leaders. So let them know that things like this are going on. It's going to save them a ton of time. And think of this, if you go through these videos, you can really differentiate what everyone's doing.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow. If you're on Twitter, YouTube, hit the like, make sure you subscribe, hit the retweet. Thank you so much. That was Grizzle Psychedelics Con 2021.
Next, Grizzle Cannabis Con. See you tomorrow.